right, let's get the ball rolling then. Thank you. All right. Everyone can make sure that their microphones are where you can be heard. I'm one of the worst ones to do that. Okay, so welcome everybody to the Hyannis Main Street and Waterfront Historic District Commission. Today is August 30th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. This is an additional meeting due to circumstances in the last that we needed to continue some things. Anyway, to all persons deemed interested or affected by the Town of Barnstable's Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission ordinance under Chapter 112, Article 3 of the Code of the Town of Barnstable, you are hereby notified that a hearing is being held at Town Hall 367 Main Street, Hyannis, Mass. Selectmen's Conference Room, 2nd floor, 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, August 30th, 2023. This meeting of August 30th, 2023 is being recorded and broadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government Access Channel in accordance with MGL Chapter 30A, Section 20. Please feel free to join us. The Chair must inquire whether anyone else is recording this meeting, and if so, please to make their presence known. Nope. You're welcome to join. I think there's another chair over there.
Thank you.
Okay. Please silence your cell phones, if you would, please. Also, I wanted to note that one can go onto the Town of Barnstable website to find the relevant new channels, because they have changed for viewing the tapes and the meeting. So I will now call the meeting to order. Our alternate member, Commissioner Kevin Matthews.
I'm here.
And you will be voting tonight, please, to make because Commissioner Cronin could not make it, so standing in. Commissioner Cornelius Kelly.
Present.
Commissioner Jennifer Hinckley Needham.
Here.
Commissioner Matt Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Cronin did let us know she was unable to make it. Commissioner Tom Doherty.
Here.
Commissioner Jack Kay.
Here.
And I, Commissioner Cheryl Powell, am also here. So welcome to everyone. I want to also welcome, we have two of our Town Council liaisons who are always welcome to join us, Town Councilor Betty Lucky and Town Councilor Nicholas Atzelis. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Your presence is always welcome. We have no new members to bring in tonight. Nothing with regard to trainings, other than to remind people, if you have not done your conflict of interest up to date, to please do so. If you need any help with finding that or any difficulties, please contact Cynthia Lovell, and she's extremely helpful in helping with that. Nothing with regard to awards tonight. We do have correspondence. I'm counting on staff to remind me if I neglect to get those read out. I'll read that correspondence in conjunction with the relevant applications, if nobody has an objection to that, to keep them concise. The first one is a continued business from Sophia Bailey, DBA NOLA Jewelry, 569 Main Street, Unit 1, Hyannis, map 308, parcel 111, with regard to a sign. This is continued from the August 2nd, 2023 meeting, so you do have the information. I want to point out that Sophia did attend that meeting on August 2nd. It was very difficult for her, as she explained, because there's only one or two of them in the shop, and it means they have to close the shop to come in. So she did ask that we read out her letter. Excuse me. To whom it may concern, I am not able to attend the hearing meeting on August 30th, 2023. I did attend on August 15th. Super 15 here. To the last meeting hearing, and my matter was not heard due to no quorum of the commission. It is very difficult for me to leave the store. Please proceed with the review of my application. Thank you, Sophia Bailey, with regard to NOLA Jewelry. The thing to read with regard to that is that we did do an inspection, and just to read out, we don't usually do that because we don't usually need to do an extension. It's very rare, so this might be an education for some of our newer members. According to Section 112-31K, it states that if the Commission fails to make a determination through issuance of a certificate of appropriateness or a disapproval within the time period specified in subsection E, which is 45 days, or within such further time as the applicant may allow in writing, the Commission shall thereupon issue a certificate of hardship due to a failure to act. The applicant hereby agrees that the time of the Commission to make the determination on application is extended to September 13th, 2023. That's officially. It does look as if she's not going to be able to do that for the same reasons that she found it difficult before and expressed for today. In extending this agreement, the applicant hereto specifically waives any claim for a grant of a certificate of appropriateness, certificate of hardship, or certificate of non-applicability due to failure to act based on the time limits applicable prior to the execution of this agreement. Just because that is so rare, I'm going to ask staff if they could explain why we could still hear this tonight if we choose to do so and to consider the application.
Sure. Jim Cuffer, Senior Planner, Planning and Development. The applicant has issued an extension at the request of the commission due to the failure of a quorum. So it's a mutual agreement to extend the time. So the commission is certainly welcome to hear and act upon that application tonight. And if the commission now fails to act at this point without an extension, then it may be constructively approved. But at this point, the commission is certainly welcome to act on that application this evening.
And just to remind, it is that extension does go to September 13th, but she had expressed to staff that it's unlikely because they simply can't afford to close the shop numerous times. I'll go by what the commission decides because I'm only one voice here, but I personally feel she attended the last one. I'm happy to hear it if the rest of the commissioners are in agreement. Is anyone not in agreement? Nope, we're good? Okay, so let's consider it. So, Jim, would you like to, oh, I'm sorry, can I help you? Nope. We will bring another chair in for you because that's for our applicants. That's for our applicants. And there's one down there.
Is it all right if I bring a chair in?
Absolutely. Or do we want to go in the other room?
I think we're okay. Moment.
Okay. Yeah, please bring one in.
I won't let anyone else in.
We aren't allowed to do that. Okay. So, Jim, would you like to tell us about the application, please?
Absolutely. So, Nola Jewelry Handmade Designs is at 569 Main Street. The applicant is Sophia Bailey. She is proposing a 44-inch by 28-inch wood sign in teal and black, both of which are on the historic color chart. There was a statement on the application for a paper sign that was a temporary sign that was there just while she was waiting for this commission to act. So we can disregard the paper sign. It is wood, and it will be, again, 44 by 28.
Is there anything else?
That is the entirety of the application.
Excellent. Does everyone have all the papers that they need? I used to go through my briefcase for this. All right. So, any questions from the commissioners? And rather than my representing it, because Jim has helped the applicant to construct this in a proper manner, if it's all right with Jim, they'll direct any clarifications to you.
Absolutely.
Do we know what the hardware is going to be on the sign?
We don't know, but my understanding it's not going to be visible from the public way, so it's going to be behind.
Okay.
But I'm unsure of the color of that hardware.
We don't know the color of the hardware?
We don't know the color of the hardware. If the commission would like to specify,
Yeah.
a chrome, metal, black, welcome to do so.
Commissioner Carter, you look like you might have a question. Any other questions for clarification from the commissioners? Nope. In that case, I'm going to open it up to public comment before we go to the deliberation of the commissioners. Is anyone from the public here to comment on this application? Anyone back here? Nope. I'll leave public comment open until such time as we go to the motions. So, commissioners, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think it's good.
I think the only comment I have is I would like to specify the colors that they're in accordance with the accepted colors and materials as per our guidelines. If we specify that, since she has not specified, I think that's a fair.
Jim, did you say that the colors are acceptable to our new guidelines? I think you said that correct?
The current existing guidelines that are in place right now, yes.
Gotcha.
But it doesn't state the material. What did it not? Okay, so just as long as it meets the current guidelines. Is that okay? Specifying that?
Yeah, it says a wood sign too.
Wood sign, yeah. Okay, excellent. All right. So in that case, done with deliberation. If there's no more deliberation on that, please, we're going to have to get another chair. Please bring another chair in. We will help you if you need it. This gentleman here is guarding the door, and he's going to help you. Okay, I'm going to close public comment now. And would one of the commissioners like to make a motion for approval or disapproval regarding a certificate of appropriateness?
I move that the commission not find the application to be compatible with the preservation and protection of the district.
Regarding Village Jewelry, 569 Main Street, Unit D1, Hyannis, map 308, parcel 111. Is there a second, please?
I second.
It is seconded. In that case, I will go down for a vote with regard to the findings, and everybody's voting that is here tonight for the commission. Commissioner Matthews?
Yes.
Commissioner Hinckley Needham?
Aye.
Commissioner Cowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Doherty?
Aye.
Commissioner Kay?
Aye.
I also say aye. Would one of the commissioners like to make a motion for the certificate of appropriateness, please?
I move to issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 569 Main Street in Hyannis, as described in the submitted materials, as long as the hardware is according to, what is it?
The supplemental guidelines.
Supplemental
The
guidelines.
Thank you. And thank you for reminding me of what I asked for. Okay. Is there a second, please?
I second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Kay. Okay. So let's go down again. Commissioner Matthews.
Aye.
Commissioner Cawley.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinckley Needham.
Aye.
Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Commissioner Doherty.
Aye.
Commissioner Kay.
Aye.
I also say aye. If we could let the applicant know, and thank her for bearing with us and for sending in the letter. All right, moving right along. My Generation Energy is the next one up for new business for the Dennis Mason Seashore Home, 63 Main Street, map 342. If you'd like to sign in here, please.
Sure.
342 parcel 017 with regard to solar roof panels. Fill in the panel, the
Okay.
ID numbers and that. We just need that you signed in. Hi, welcome. So, hi. Tell us a little bit about your project.
So it's pretty straightforward. We are proposing a 20-panel solar installation on partially south, partially east-facing roof spaces of property located at 63 Main Street. We include, instead of, I suppose I should clarify, we could have used the entire east-facing roof, but the exposure of the 4 panels on those south-facing roof spaces is going to be quite optimal for the business or the homeowner, property owner. And so we decided to maximize that south-facing roof space and then put the balance of the panels on the east-facing roof. And so that is pretty much, it's all black panels, Solaria panels. We've used them a few times in this business district, and it's all perfect rectangle, so.
Pretty straightforward.
And that's a black roof it's going to be on?
I think it's a gray roof, if I remember correctly.
And you won't be able to see them from the road?
Oh, you can see them from the road.
Oh, you can?
Yes.
Not for Main Street, though, according to these pictures.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
From
But
that
this-
side
the
street
side
there.
street.
From the
Yeah,
side
yeah,
street?
right.
But not Main Street?
Full disclosure, yeah.
So, any other questions? Anything else you wanted to present?
I don't think so. I think it just to that point of from Main Street is the way he built or renovated the building was that the front of the building really looks the same and everything new is in the back. So I think it's pretty good design.
Okay. So, commissioners, any questions, clarifications on the presentation?
Is this system, are all the conduits and all the controls and everything for this system on the back of the building?
So we actually prefer to do it through the roof penetration method so that
Okay.
we try to bring all the conduit inside whenever it's possible, and there is adequate attic space in this location. So my assumption, unless my contractors get there and see something that I didn't see, but I'm assuming that all of the wiring is going to be brought through the inside down into the basement, so there won't be any exterior conduit.
No, just the only thing that got to be is the fire department disconnects and stuff
The
that you have to.
disconnect switch is necessary. That's going to go on the outside of the building next to the existing service.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other, Commissioner Doherty, you looked before like you had a question. No. Nope. Any other questions? Nope.
What's the color of the framing of it going to be? Black
All
as well?
black.
All
Yeah.
black?
Yeah.
I think you did say that, didn't you?
Yeah, the solarium modules are all black. There's no, yeah.
Okay.
White, it's the white back sheeting that doesn't exist.
In that case, I'm going to open it up for public comment first. Nope. Yes, Town Councilor Lucky for public comment.
Yeah, maybe it's a question. I don't know if I can ask a question. Are you the solar designer or are you the owner of the property?
Solar. I work for My Generation Energy.
Okay. And I'm just curious because we see this on housing projects and it's apartments, correct, inside of there?
Yes.
Do the solars go to the various apartments or does it go to a single conduit? How do you do
So
that?
that's a choice of the property owner. It can be, so you have to connect into what's considered a host meter.
Right.
And from that host meter, you can allocate the energy to different meters. So if you put it on a meter that has a large load, a small system like this could just be serving that one meter. But if you had overproduction, you could then allocate to other meters.
So where is this power going? Is it going to a determined unit or is it going to be?
Well, he has some common space areas that he pays the utility bill for. So he actually has, I believe, meters for each unit inside so he can see what each unit is using. But I'm not sure exact. We're tying into a common meter.
Right. No, I just, my comment, I guess, in general, is that I find this fantastic. I like to see solar as much as we can, and it becomes very difficult because of the issues you talk about when you're in apartment buildings. And I've watched this, and that's why I was asking if you're the solar designer.
So to answer that is it can be really complicated
Yes.
sometimes. So what has happened in the past with other projects is that we've tied into a meter that, say, is in a tenant's name, and then the tenant decides to move, and then all credits that are built up for that account are then gifted to Eversource if that tenant moves out, which is not optimal for really anybody except
Right.
Eversource. So typically what will happen is we'll suggest to the property owner that they should keep their name and of record on that account. And then so if tenants come and go, but the energy can offset the expense for that tenant, even though the bill is in the property
Exactly.
owner's name. So that does happen quite often.
So have they taken your recommendation on this?
It's getting better.
Okay.
But yes.
No,
a lot
I
of
find
people-
it, it's
It's just
fascinating.
confusing, and
Yeah.
so that's the thing, is it's just a learning curve, especially when I'm working with one gentleman who has 26 electric bills that he pays. And so he has a large system, and he allocates to tenants, and he allocates to other buildings where he pays a lot of electric bills. So it's a way to offset his expense. And also, he really is just socially minded and wants to help some folks who don't necessarily have the means to pay their electric bills.
Right. No, I just think you've done this beautifully. You can't see it from Main Street, and I've watched this house transform with the addition in the back, and I really commend it, from a town council standpoint, when we did the downtown zoning that we'll be talking about later with our next one. We saved some neighborhoods, kept the 2.5-story. So I really appreciate from an historic standpoint that they've worked within the confines, put a very respectful addition on the back, have created housing, and now on top of that are doing the solar, which helps everyone. So I just really commend it. I think you've done a beautiful job. And, I just was curious for the question there because I have heard other landlords say it's too hard. And it's difficult, but you can do it.
It's getting better. It is
Yes.
complicated, and the rules do change. So,
Right.
But it's getting better. And as company, we're a local company, and there's a learning curve. So
Right.
we've done it the wrong way in the past, but we're always looking to correct that and do it the right way.
And it helps us with our learning curve.
Yeah.
Very pertinent questions from the public comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, so any more from public comment? Public speaks? No other public comment? Okay, so in that case, I'll keep that open until we go to the motions. Commissioners? Oh, I'm sorry, staff.
No problem.
Good point. I'm glad you-
Thank you. Jim Comfort, Senior Planner, Planning and Development. Just two quick clarifying questions. The racking underneath, is it color, materials?
All black with black end caps, and there is also Critter Guard, which is also a black wire mesh just going around the perimeter of each array to keep the squirrels out.
Perfect, thank you. And the illustration that defines where the locations of the panels, those are exactly as proposed. I know the commission historically has liked to bring them together, and you had mentioned that in the introduction. So that's as proposed is how you're going to lay it out. Perfect. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Any other staff comments? We didn't have any correspondence with regard to this one, right? Okay, just wanted to make sure that I would take care of that. Okay, so I'll leave that open till we have, go to motions. Commissioners, what do you feel about it?
No questions here.
Okay, so the things that have come up is with regard to the road. I want to ask staff, is there, we do have the guidelines with regard to the road, but the location of this is not such that it's going to violate any of those?
No, the fact that it's visible from away is the reason they're before us this evening. Is so it doesn't violate the guidelines, but it must meet the guidelines, and as you guys have reviewed.
Just wanted to make sure it doesn't. Okay.
Could you put them on the other side, or is that a right-of-way on that side as well?
So the reason I chose not to put it on that side is because the tree is on the neighbor's property, so they will have no control over pruning that tree, because actually the west-facing roof could be slightly better if that weren't a factor. But since it is, and the roof spaces are very similar for effectiveness, so my thought process was, let's just make it easy and keep friendly neighbors friendly.
Good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other things that came up is that there's no exterior conduit and that the racking is all black,
Yes.
correct? So if the commissioners are ready, I'm going to close public comment and ask for a motion from one of the commissioners. So public comment is closed. And if someone would like to make a motion on the findings, please, with the addition that no exterior conduit and the racking is all black as the clarification.
I move that the commission find this application to be compatible with preservation and protection of the district.
With regard to the address, please.
At 63 Main Street in Hyannis, as long as the racking, the framing, and any other equipment is black, and the conduit is within the house.
No, okay, excellent. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, so I'll go Commissioner Matthews,
Aye.
Commissioner Cowley,
Aye.
Commissioner Hinckley Needham.
Aye.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Doherty.
Aye.
Commissioner Kay.
Aye.
I also say aye. Would a commissioner like to make a motion on the certificate of appropriateness, please?
I'll do that. I move to issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 63 Main Street in Hyannis as described in the submitted materials.
Second.
All right, so Commissioner Matthews,
Aye.
Commissioner Cowley,
Aye.
Commissioner Hinckley Needham.
Aye.
Commissioner Clark. Aye. Commissioner Doherty.
Aye.
Commissioner Kay.
Aye.
I also say aye. Congratulations.
Thank you, everyone.
It looks like a nice project.
Thank you. Dennis did a good job.
Good to know. All right, we're ready for wind development. If we could bear with me, we've got a number of people who are going to come in. We may go into the other room, as I counted about 15 people in there.
Yeah.
Are we going to have room in here?
Yeah. Hope you guys are all nice and comfy. actually works. Hey, how about that? So whoever wants to be the main presenter can sit here. And we can bring in a couple chairs if you like.
And if you could sign in, please. Carlos, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
How are things?
Very good.
Excellent. Do you know how to use the thing to
Matt Murata, who's our architect. I'm Rob Brennan. I'm their attorney.
Oh,
Matt
okay.
will be stepping through. So,
Okay, that's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
All right.
We're getting chairs. Good evening. Good evening.
We got a big team with us. We're gonna grab a couple chairs.
Karen, should we not go into the other room? Because this is, I think we should too. I think this is going to be very accurate.
I think we're outgrowing now.
I think, yeah, Jim,
You want to do a recess and go to the room?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to call a 5-minute recess?
I'm going to call a 10-minute recess, please. We're going to go into the town council room. David?
It's 4 stories they're going to do.
I just wanted to make sure he wasn't out on a bathroom break. All right, thank you everyone for bearing with us for our moving due to the number of people that we have so that we can accommodate you comfortably. We are reopening or reconvening the meeting of the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission on August 30th, 2023. We are now in the James Crocker Hearing Room on the second floor of Town Hall, 367 Main Street, Hyannis. And again, thank you for bearing with us on that so that everyone can be comfortable. It is currently on continuous this meeting, 7:05 p.m. We are now on continued business. And by the way, thank you to our applicants on this we did not have a quorum last time, so for allowing us to, being okay with and accommodating us. So we are now reconvening with regard to the Wind Development Company, LP, for 307 Main Street, Nominee Trust, Conrad Watson, Trustee, 307 Main Street, Hyannis, map 327, parcel 103, with regard to a demolition. I want to ask the attorney for the applicants,
Yes.
if you would like to clarify, do you want to take both of these together, or do you want to do them separately, the demolition and the new building? We're happy to do it either way, but what's easiest for you?
I think if you allow the Wind team to give the presentation, it's kind of one presentation that will cover the project and the existing building. And after that, maybe taking up the two issues in series, starting with the demolition, which I think, and then continuing on for any comments and discussion and feedback on the certificate of appropriateness.
So I will read in the second part as well, so we can do that either way. Is that all right, Jim? Okay. So the wind
Yes. Sorry. So reading them both would be appropriate.
Yeah. So Wind Development Company, LP, for 307 Main Street, Nominee Trust, Conrad Wasson, Trustee, 307 Main Street, Hyannis, map 327, parcel 103, the second part being for a new building. If the gentleman would like to identify who he is and sign in, please.
Have signed in Robert Brennan, attorney representing Wind Development in this project. And it is a privilege to be back in front of this body again. I've been here before as a project applicant, and just a quick commentary on kind of this project and what's going forward. Like many of you, sitting at the dais and in the room, I've been involved, not only as an attorney, but as a resident of Barnstable and as a stakeholder on Main Street. Our law firm, Smolak and Vaughn, is located right across the street at 255 Main Street. And this project, and again, commenting on it from those multiple perspectives, I believe is exactly the kind of project that the stakeholders envisioned in doing the work, not only over this past year in adopting the form-based code and with the Main Street reconsideration of how it's going to be designed for traffic flow, but in all the work that the Main Street bid has done. And I serve as a board member of the Business Improvement District as well. And we've said all along, that if we put the pieces in place, we'll attract the developers that are able to bring scale, that bring track records of experience, and to bring, most importantly, the quality of thoughtful design to Main Street as part of its continued revitalization. And I have had the privilege of working with Wynn, and can assure you that exactly the kind of developer with the experience, with the track record, with the bandwidth, and the ability to provide the broad spectrum of housing that Barnstable, Hyannis, and Main Street need, we have in Wynn Development. We have been working, with the town since early this year, starting with formal meetings, or informal meetings, I should say, with department heads in May. We have been through informal site review, and that site plan review was informed in continued conversation and feedback loops and revisions to designs. So the plans that were submitted to you that we're going to review tonight are the product, of that iterative, feedback of working, with town staff, and continually, listening to stakeholders, meeting with stakeholders, and refining those plans. And I think Wynn is coming here tonight, very proud of the plans they're putting forward, but also with ears open and looking forward to feedback from this board. So without kind of further introductions, it's my privilege to introduce and turn the mic over to Adam Stein, who is Wind Development's Senior Vice President and Director of Development. Adam will introduce the company and the rest of the team, and then I'll come back to you when we get into the consideration of the two petitions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I could ask you to sign in and just state your name, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Stein with Wind Development. Thanks for having us tonight. Nice to see everyone. I'll be quick. I just want to give a little background on wind companies and who we are and what we do, and we'll get into the design, criteria and program for tonight. Next slide, please. Oh, is it me? Talking to someone like a... So the design team or the project team, wind companies, myself and Ramey Schneider, you'll meet, are both with Wind Development. Icon Architecture, Matt is here tonight with Icon, is the design firm that we're using for this project. Beals & Thomas is the civil engineer. Stantec is the traffic engineer. Rob is with Smolik & Vaughn, the council. And then the design initiative is sort of a creative group. They're going to help us with some placemaking and some creative ideas for the property as we go through the process. A little bit about wind development. So there's wind companies is the broader umbrella company, and there are two arms within the company. Wind Development, which is the development company. I call it the engine of the business. And then there's the management company, the company that cares for and manages the assets after the development company creates those communities. I think what's important to say about the development company are a few things. We've been around for a long period of time. It's a 50-year company. It's a tested, tried and true. We've been through several economic downturns and upturns. Our business is housing. Our business is not only housing, but mixed income housing. That's what we do. That's what we do at our core, and we really haven't deviated that over the years, and I think that's important. Another thing that I think is important is that we are long-term owners of our assets. A lot of the properties that were developed 50 years ago are still either owned or managed by Wind today. So we're not just merchant developers that come in, build something, develop and leave. We're attached to these assets for a long period of time, partly because of the financing that's associated with the properties, but partly because that's our mission, that's what we do. And we think about the developments in long term. We think about how the buildings will work, how they'll be accessed, how the securities will work, the security on the building. We look at building life cycle and materials because we're not thinking about it from a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, we're thinking about it from a 15, 20-year pro forma. So I think that just gives you a mindset on how we look at properties and how we look at the type of communities that we wish to develop. These are just two quick examples of the type of housing that we're going to propose tonight on Main Street. The housing you'll see tonight on Main Street that Matt will identify is very different in terms of finish and fit out, just so you understand. The top building is located in Boston on Comm Ave in Brighton, and the bottom and the building on the lower left is in Lowell, and actually Matt's team designed that building as well. The one in Lowell, I think, is more relative to Main Street Hyannis. The municipality had land they wanted to redevelop. It was part of a larger overlay district, and they really wanted to re-energize and bring back some commercial into that location. They wanted to develop a judicial center. They wanted to develop a parking garage, and they realized they needed to start with housing first. There is housing in the area with mill redevelopments, and this is one of the first new construction deals or developments that the city of Lowell supported. And we built a very similar program to what we're proposing tonight, which is a portion of affordable housing, a portion of workforce or middle-income housing, and a portion of market rate housing. And we'll get into that a little bit tonight in terms of what that means. But what it really means is it's mixed income, inclusive housing for the long term. For 40, 50 years, that's the requirement. And if you looked at the building, and if you looked at the units, and if you looked at the finishes, they're all the same. So the affordable unit is the same as the middle income unit, is the same as the market rate unit. And I think that's the beauty of the program that we'll utilize for the Main Street program. And I think that's why Brighton and Lowell and many other municipalities have supported this type of project. Wynn Residential is our management company. So we've had a lot of conversations about who will manage the property, how will you deal with parking, how will you deal with leases, how will you deal with security. We're active owners, meaning we have on-site management presence, we have on-site security and maintenance presence, and I think the questions that may come up we can answer through the terms of professional management. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think you have that in other rental developments downtown where you may have a landlord, but because we're regulated, because we do this on a daily basis, I think we have some really strong protocols in place to help with the things that the town and the community is looking for us to do. So we talked about mixed income housing and what that means. I talked about the unit mix and how they'll all be very similar. And basically we're talking about three types of incomes and three bands of income. So affordable housing, which is defined as 60% or less of the area median income. So residents that make 60% or less AMI is defined as affordable housing. Middle or workforce housing is a separate band above that between 80 and 120% AMI. I know this doesn't mean anything, but we'll give you specific details. It's just income brackets. And then market rate housing is unrestricted. It's what the market bears. There are no income criteria. And in a property like this, you'll probably end up with 50% of the units affordable, 25% as middle or workforce, and 25% as market rate, if that makes sense. So say 70 to 80% of the units will have some type of rent and income restriction associated with those units. You want to talk a little, Raymond, or you want me to keep rolling? Keep rolling? Yeah. So to break it down in terms of the income tiers and who those people are. So I think it's helpful to look at numbers and to look at income. So in the middle slide, which I define as the affordable tier, which is 60% AMI or less, if you equate that to income, what does that mean? What are those single or families making? It's $55,000 a year for a one-bedroom unit. So that's a teacher, that's a firefighter, that's a municipal worker, that's the affordable housing tier. The next tier up is the workforce or the middle income tier. That's a combined income for a two-bedroom household of $77,000 a year. Again, who are those people? It's police, nurse, at a hospital. It's people that want to work and live in your town are who we're targeting for housing. And then on the market rate, which isn't shown here, there's no restriction. So that just gives you an idea of who the incomes are. And I think it's important to note that under the affordable and workforce programs, those residents pay rent. The whole program is designed so that the residents pay 30% of their income towards rent. So they pay rent. It's based on their income. They sign a 12-month lease. There's no other subsidy propping up the resident. The subsidy is propping up the community, it's propping up the building. So the residents are working residents, and we want them to live in a nice place. They want to work downtown. One of the things that we talked about, and I missed, and I'll be quick, is that we want to work in municipalities that want us to be there. And as Rob described, we spent a lot of time talking to the business district, residents, council members, and a couple themes have come back over and over again, which is we don't have staff, we don't have people to keep our restaurants and bars and shops open, and we wish there was housing downtown, mixed income housing at different income tiers to help us keep our doors open. When we hear those words, and then we look at the form-based code that allows for multifamily density downtown, we say, we're not here forcing anything. We're actually here, we think, we hope, solving a problem. So that's how we look at this. We hope we're solving a problem. We've gotten really, really strong feedback. We've incorporated a lot of that. And I think you'll find us thoughtful, professional, and really wanting to do the right thing, and are very happy to be here with this team tonight. So I think that's part of my spiel, and I'll pass it on to Matt Murata, our project architect. Thanks.
And if you could also please state your name again.
Good evening, Matt Murata with Icon Architecture. So I always like to start with a context plan, although I'm sure all of you are very, very familiar with the site already. But we are at the corner of Old Colony and Main Street. And you can see here illustrated in the diagram, we show a 5-minute walking radius and a 15-minute walking radius. And I do this just to help illustrate all the amenities that the town of Hyannis already provides, Village of Hyannis already provides to all your residents. And it really is a gateway as well to your main street. The fact that the site sits at the corner of Old Colony and Main, it has strong axial connections not only to Main Street and the whole business district, but all the way down to Hyannis Harbor. I think that's really important to understand, not just down to Hyannis Harbor, but down up to the transportation center as well. So we're really at a crossroads and at a gateway to your downtown. Some context photos just for reference, a mix of Main Street buildings, our site as well, 307 Main Street, which is the original old bank building here that's been left vacant, the town hall, the green, and I love the little artist shanties as well that you guys have set up in the green. Talking about the site itself, again, just orienting you, Main Street is up on Plan North here, and then Old Colony running north-south for the most part. While we do feel like there is the corner is your gateway and access point, and the Main Street is the focus, we don't want to lose track of Old Colony and how important it is as well. But just to give you a little bit of context, and we'll dive into the more specifics about the plan, but generally speaking, the building is laid out along Main Street and Old Colony. We are using an existing curb cut off of Old Colony to access the site, and we will be only allowing emergency access off of Main Street. And a lot of this has to do with the form-based code and special permits. We are proposing at-grade parking with the building above it, which is illustrated here as covered parking. And then we'll also have some common amenity and leasing office space at grade here with a concentration of the amenity and common space out at the corner for the public view. We are coming up into the site. There is a significant grade change on the site, especially as you're coming down Main Street. The elevation changes pretty significantly. And then as you come up Old Colony, from Old Colony onto the site, there's also a steep increase. So we've had to kind of get a little tricky with the access into the site, and we are extending our building out over the access drive and coming in. You can circulate through and around the site internally. And again, we are providing only emergency egress off of Main Street itself. You guys have done, first of all, an amazing job incorporating the form-based code. I've actually had the opportunity to work on a number of projects in my career now that have utilized form-based codes, and I will say you guys did it right. There is a tendency sometimes to get a little too detailed in the form-based code, but I think you guys nailed it on the head with the amount of information published in it, allowing us to get to the higher densities, and really still concentrating on making sure that the building is massed in an appropriate way and gets broken down. And while we understand that there's, and we have been looking at the draft guidelines that are circulating currently, we are aware of those and incorporating those to the greatest extent possible as well into the plan. For the form-based code, I'm going to run through just a couple of the high-level, big-picture items that we are required to work within. We are allowed to be a 4-story building, and we have the 4th story can either be set back 8 feet with a flat roof, or it can be a pitched volume with 50% of it being dormered. We are maintaining a 0 to 15-foot setback. While we're not taking advantage of the 0, we are setting somewhere in between there, as you can see from the varied volumes in and out. And then along the major streets, we do have a minimum street wall percentage that we have to maintain. The form-based code dictates that along Main Street, we need to have 80% of our frontage as a building. And along Old Colony, we need to maintain 40%. as building. But the form-based code does get into a little bit further details with how that massing needs to get broken down. We are not allowed to have any more than 180-foot max contiguous elevation before we have to have some vertical break, which actually works out really well on this site because there's also stipulations that at every 200, no more than 200 feet, you have to provide a pedestrian access back into the site from Main Street, which is what you can see illustrated here. And then again, another 880-foot max piece of the building. Excuse me. And again, I think that the form-based code has been set up very well. And I think we've matched and hit all the marks that are set within it, and are 100% compliant. Getting into the floor plans really quickly, as I mentioned, on the ground floor we have the service level parking, and then we have our wing of residential units above. Above, it really just stacks up for 2 floors. In the second and third floor, it's a mixture of 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and studios. And some 3 bedrooms as well. And then as we get to the 4th floor, you can start to see where we have to push and pull a little bit to maintain units in the dormered section of the 4th floor. I always like to start off a project just kind of getting into it a little bit with some precedent imagery. I think, obviously we're here on the Cape. We are looking to be distinctly New England and contextual, but thinking about, gable ends, pitched roofs, dormers, the materiality that we typically see in the New England and Cape Cod area, and just kind of starting to talk and get a little bit of a look and feel before we dive too deep into the project. Thinking about height and massing along Main Street, and again, we are compliant with the zoning code, but our proposed building is a height of around 50 feet to its highest peak. While we are 4 stories, you can see here the top story would be a dormered piece. When you consider that in relationship to the church across, the church, while it's much taller in the spire, we are kind of hitting the same level at 50 feet of the main massing of the building. And again, further down Main Street, Barnstable Town Hall, which is upwards of 60 feet. You can see here from the cross section, we are proposing to dormer sections of the 4th floor, but this also allows us to do this little parapet detail, which completely screens the mechanical equipment from the Main Street. There would be no sight lines along Main Street where you could visually see any of our mechanical equipment on the roof. One more thing to note, in this heavy dashed line here is a representation of the existing building that's on site today from the sidewalk elevation. I always like to show shadow studies just to show what kind of impacts or non-impacts there are on the site. Typically we take these 3 to 4 times at different points of the year, usually the equinox. And you can see that with our solar orientation, we typically are shading the street in the early morning, and then as we get into the afternoon and later evening, we're really concentrating shading on our portion of the site. When you get a little bit later in the evening, it starts to come across Old Colony, but this is obviously in 321, which is when the sun's starting to come down a little bit, and obviously as we get into the summer months, there's very minimal solar and shadow impact on Main Street and Old Colony. Oh, I thought there was one more. There's not. So when we looked at the site, we really felt like, I mentioned the fact that the corner of Old Colony and Main Street was a gateway. So we really felt like that was an important marker on the site itself and wanted to emphasize that, and illustrating it is more of a tower element that has a placemaking ability and really focuses on kind of the outdoor space at grade here, where we're presenting a small pocket park. Again, we are set back 0 to 15 feet, although we do not ever come in at a 0 lot line, so we do have well-landscaped front yard. For the massing of the building, as I mentioned, we had to break it down into 2 major pieces with a center volume and acting as our 200-foot max entrance and pedestrian way between our Main Street and our internal portion of the site. But what we did is looked at working with a regular rhythm of gabled end projecting bays, regular bays with the attic story and dormered sections, and then again the tower element here at the corner of Old Colony and Main Street. Really trying to emphasize and break down the massing of the building, not making it look like one contiguous large building, but also putting a lot of effort into making sure that the building didn't look too different and it looks like it's part of a series of buildings that could have been built over time. I always like to kind of reference when we do buildings like this, they're kind of speaking to each other as cousins, not necessarily siblings, so there's enough differentiation between the two. A look down Main Street towards the intersection of Old Colony. Again, you're seeing the gable end bays. We start to play with a little bit more contemporary detailing with our siding choices and materials, but sticking with the true classic and historic lap siding, shingles, and trim. While we are illustrating our windows to look like double hung, they won't be that in the end. Then that's basically due to the new energy codes. They're going to be casement windows, but they'll illustrate and look like traditional double hungs. Coming around Old Colony, I mentioned that we had some steep grading that was challenging to deal with, and to, maintaining the 40% street wall on Old Colony as well, which was a minimum, not a maximum. We did have to bring the building out and kind of straddle that existing curb cut, which is the best place for us to actually come into the site anyways, and utilizing that as our main vehicular entrance. Again, carrying the same kind of language, gabled ends, dormers, and repeating bays to help break up the facade. Just a quick, I think it's pretty fun to walk around downtown Hyannis at night. I made sure to do so the last time we had our community meeting here. And it's fun to see all the wonderful lighting that's happening, and the energy definitely changes when it becomes nighttime downstairs, and we want to make sure we capture that and incorporate that as well into our design. And you can start to see we're totally open to having some fun and playing around with lights as well. And so I talked about the materials, and we have a mixture of fiber cement lap siding, composite shingles, some vertical board and batten style. All this will be composite or fiber cement, which lasts forever, and we'll always be working within the historic approved color selection. And then the roof materials is just be a typical architectural asphalt shingle, and perforated metal panels will be at certain locations along Main Street where we have parking behind, and I can get into that a little bit further. And also we're looking to incorporate some brick at the base of the building, which actually illustrates better in this image, down at the base of the building as well. And then, so the perforated metal is really meant to be acting as a screen along the garage level, and we're still kind of experimenting and figuring out what that means exactly for the window and the openings, but we do have parking behind there that we do want to screen and keep some open air as well. And I'm going to turn it over to our landscape architect, Regan, from Beals & Thomas, to talk a little bit more about the site itself and some of the pieces and parts that they'll be incorporating.
And if you could please state your name as well.
Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, good evening. I'm Regan Andriola, landscape architect with Beals & Thomas. This will be fairly quick, I think. But as you can see here up on the screen, we have our landscape site plan. We have, the site is, pretty dense, but we have met all the zoning requirements for landscaping, and we have landscaping internal to the site within the parking lot areas.
Yeah, Regan, if you could bring your mic down a little bit more toward so we can hear you.
Sorry. The green's on.
Is that better, David? You want to say? Okay.
Want me to start over?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. But thank you for offering.
Yep. Okay, so this is a little late. So we do have landscape islands within the property, internal to the surface parking lot. We also have parking, landscaping along the perimeter buffer. We have landscaping all along Main Street with a combination of upright trees and shrubs. Let's see. Okay. We show 2 of the existing trees along Main Street where we will be doing work, that those are being preserved, at least as of now, unless there's a request from the town to do otherwise. We have a couple areas of some decorative paving internal to the site at this drop-off area. We haven't decided exactly whether it's decorative pavers or stamped or colored concrete. That's still up for discussion, but we have one other area where we would try to do something a little bit more interesting up at the corner here, where we're calling it kind of our pocket park. Right now we have it, it's all shown on our property. And then also the landscaping, as I said, primarily all within our property, but we have shown some areas that go off into the right-of-way, kind of flanking the entrance off of Old Colony, primarily because of the grading that we need to be doing to make that driveway work. So we're kind of, we'll be dressing up that entrance. And then site lighting throughout. We have a combination of pole-mounted lights that will be mounted at no more than 12-foot height throughout the parking areas. Under the building will be, there's also wall-mounted lights, but mounted at between 10 and 12 feet on the exterior of the building, kind of along this north-south portion. In order to light the parking. Obviously, ceiling lighting underneath the building here in the parking area. There will be some recessed linear lighting under the drive-through canopy. So those are kind of the key features. And then as far as the landscaping, we have a combination of trees, shrubs, ornamental grasses. All selected plants are native species. The zoning does require to have irrigation out here, but really once established, the idea is that these plants should be able to be, great on their own and thrive because they're all native to specifically this region. Primarily, again, with smaller spaces, we have a lot of upright, narrower trees, just because of space constraints, but a combination of both evergreen and deciduous. The same with the shrubs and the ground covers and the grasses, really just trying to do a mix of things that will be provide interest throughout the year, all 4 seasons, combination of textures, colors, flowering, all those fun things. So pretty basic, but I'm happy to answer questions about it after. And I think that's all I've got. What are we on to? That's it? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to introduce the next person? Or?
That's all we have.
Oh,
I took
okay.
her part by mistake, so she's here to answer questions as well. She's part of it.
Okay. Oops. Okay, that was a great presentation. You put a lot of work into it. Thank you. So first of all, I'm going, as I do usually, I'm going to ask the commissioners if they have any questions with regard to the presentation. And if it's all right with you, I'll have them just not take each subject, but to just ask if they can on clarification before going to public comment. Any of the commissioners? Commissioner Doherty.
Madam Chairman, just real quick, for every member, because we're normally not in this room, just push the button on the mic to speak. Thank you.
Just with the landscaping, and then I'll go into the other
is your
things I have
thing on?
questions.
Is your
Is
thing
it on?
Oh, okay. All right. I couldn't hear.
Okay. You have 120 units, and there's going to be children here. You left no areas for parks, no open space.
Sure. Ramy Schneider, do I need to sign in? Okay. Ramy Schneider, Wind Development Companies. So you're right. We haven't left a whole lot of space inside the site for parks.
But there'll
We
be
do have that-
children, right? I was saying like a playground for children.
Yeah, so we think that there's a lot of amenities, as Matt, thank you for pulling up this diagram, within walking distance of our site that we want to encourage our community and residents to be part of. And so typically, we don't often have playgrounds for many of our developments on site. We supplement those with the community playgrounds that are within proximity to the development.
Could we
I'd
just,
also only state that we have a very small amount of 3-bedroom units. and that's where we typically see our family units or a lot of children. And so I think while there will be some here, there likely won't be that many here.
How many three-bedroom units are there?
I believe we have 8% 3 bedrooms, which
What was that?
like a little bit less than 10 units, probably.
Could we go back to the picture of the building on Main Street in Old Colony? I personally find that overwhelming, for downtown Hyannis. And I worked with the planning department and the architects out of Boston when we were coming up with the guidelines for Main Street in Hyannis. And if this fits the guidelines, I'm a little disappointed in what we did. I think it's massive. We were trying to do with the guidelines with the Historic Commission and the Planning Department to protect the integrity of downtown Hyannis. I personally find this building, very genetic compared to what you see all over in Boston. Rob, you did 255 Main Street, and you did all that development on Pleasant Street. I thought that was terrific, for downtown, bringing in, market value housing along with affordable housing. I would love to see 255 Main Street, start from Old Colony, up to Ocean Street instead of this. Do we have to have a massive building? Could we have separate buildings with more open space? Can we have a playground in there? I just think this is very, very citified, and it's not the essence of Cape Cod. You said you were going to use balconies. I don't see any balconies. Or even the top floor, if we had separate units, do they all have to be 4 stories? Because you have open decks, on some, and some 3 stories, some 4 stories. Just to mix it up. This just looks like, downtown New Haven, Connecticut, downtown Boston, not Cape Cod. So that's my initial reaction. Thank you.
Any other commissioners have any questions just on the presentation?
I had a question.
Commissioner Clark. And then
I just wanted to get some clarification on the materials page. I think it's diagram A302. So it's like it changes from the, I believe, fiber cement to the vertical board and then to the composite shingle. So is this meant to just show like options that you may use, or are you planning to jump from blue to white to yellow, blue, like it is on that diagram?
Yeah, so it's a little washed out on this just because of the lighting, but everything that we presented in the elevations and the perspectives is what we're presenting for the actual colors.
Okay.
So when you look at the material board, it's just representative of the different types of materials that we would have on the building. So we do have the solid lap siding that's blue. We have the white lap siding. We do have a couple of different colors of the composite shingles. And everything is illustrated as we're proposing it on the elevations and perspectives. Does that answer your question?
So yeah, so like on that tower, for example, you're going to have it half white and then half shingled?
Correct. That's what we're proposing. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Any more questions?
That's it.
Commissioner Matthews.
Just a quick question to Jim first. Jim, all the materials and the lighting choices and all that kind of stuff that we've seen in the presentation, has that gone through the guidelines in another committee or in another department to make sure those are all up to specs?
Right. So what you have before you does reflect our form-based zoning. So it has gone through informal site plan, and where each of the departments review for compliance, and it is in compliance with zoning. And then in terms of the guidelines, design guidelines, right now before you have your existing supplemental guidelines that we use for each and every project. And as you guys know, many of it is discretionary, so it's up to this commission. So you are the entity that will be reviewing it. I did provide in your package the guidelines for new construction, which talks about building spacing, scale, massing, relation to the building streets and roof forms. And so that's what this commission's charge is. And it's actually, if you don't mind, I'll just quickly read the jurisdiction of this commission so that we can get our minds right. So the commission's jurisdiction, except as this article may otherwise provide, no building, structure, setting, or part thereof within the district shall be constructed, demolished, moved, or altered in any way that affects any exterior architectural feature subject to public view until this commission shall first have issued a certificate of appropriateness, certificate of non-applicability, or certificate of hardship with respect to such construction, demo, movement, or alteration. So this commission really is, as Matt illustrated, looking at that board of materials and indicating what is appropriate for this district. So that is your purview. Aside from that, the site plan itself, traffic, water, sewer, et cetera, has gone through site plan review, informal site plan review. The next step would be formal site plan review again, back through the departments and the building commissioner for final approval.
Great, thank you. The building is beautiful. It's gorgeous. But I'm in the middle because I can see where some of the committee members may say it's a little bit more, and I'm using this in quotes, urbanized. It's something you'd see more in a bigger city than you would see in a smaller Main Street kind of situation. But it's gorgeous, and I like it's an interesting building with all the different materials you're using. I think that's great. I do understand, like I said, the concerns of being in a historic district, that it might look a little bit too, quote unquote, trendy. I also would like to get more of a hard figure on that setback. You say 0 to 15, but I'd like to know exactly, kind of a little bit more of an idea of what that is, because I'd like the setback to be as much as possible. Like the greenery you have in front of here is great. I mean, I think that makes it look good. I see that you've gone through the water and I know all of the, all the garbage facilities, recycles are inside. And so I know you've done a lot of that work, and I've read through all of the materials that you sent. And I think it looks fantastic. But I do understand the other side where it's like, this might not be historic. But I applaud your efforts, and I like it a lot. And again, I'm right in the middle there. I see both sides and have a very open mind to hear what everybody else has to say.
Any other commissioners with questions? I always leave mine to last. Anyone else?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley.
Thank you. Just a question as to whether or not you have any data on the actual pedestrian traffic that goes back and forth in this area. I'm mindful of the fact that there is a very large motel across the street. I'm mindful of the fact that you have a rather massive transportation center in the area. I believe that when we make our evaluations, not all aspects of Main Street, not all portions are the same, and I think there needs to be some flexibility in evaluating what we do in a particular part of Main Street. So that's why I'm very curious about pedestrian traffic. Do you have any data on that?
I don't off the top of my head, but we can follow up with some data. And Jim, I'm sure we can work with you and town staff to come up with that.
I'm personally of the opinion that this is a very energetic, transformative idea. I think it may bring a lot of good energy to a part of Main Street that right now, in my opinion, is fallow.
Yeah.
So,
listen, we tend to agree. We think that having additional foot traffic, especially here across from the rail station at the gateway location, moving into the downtown thoroughfare with all of the local shops, only enhances safety and only helps the revitalization that I think we've heard a lot that people want to happen on Main Street. And so we know that there's a lot of foot traffic there right now. I'm not sure that all of it's necessarily welcomed all the time. And I think that we've heard repeatedly in our conversations with various stakeholders that something like this would only be beneficial in terms of year-round foot traffic and eyes on the street and continuing to bolster the local economy.
And if I may add to that, I think Commissioner Carl made a really good point there in that, Main Street, this whole district, this commission's done a good job refocusing on where we're talking about a specific project, because as we know, the Main Street is different from the harbor, and East End may be different than the West End. And this specific location is that cross sector, and for pedestrian activity, certainly Main Street east-west, and maybe this is kind of a somewhat of a dead spot on that side of the road. But also we're talking about the north-south going to the harbor, and so many people coming from the transportation center walking down to the harbor there. So that's an excellent point.
Commissioner Crowley, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Any others? Commissioner
I have a
Hinckley
question.
Needham.
I have a question about how close it is to the road. Is that in the guidelines that you made? Like,
It's in the zoning.
it's in the zoning to be that close to the road? It's a beautiful building. It just seems so overwhelming. And Main Street, to me, I'd like it to be quaint, to remain quaint. And it just looks huge and so close to the road. So did that have to be done, the closeness to the road?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you did say what the distance was to the road, did you not?
So with the form-based zoning, that is the intent of Main Street. So not everywhere on the new zoning does that reflect bringing it to the street. Main Street specifically is called out as providing a pedestrian-oriented downtown environment with a continued active streetscape. So as you wander down Main Street, that is in fact what you see in your setbacks, right up on the sidewalk, engaging with the pedestrian activity, allowing for opportunities for overhangs to then cross into the pedestrian way, engaged patio activities, et cetera. So the intent of the form-based code was, in fact, on Main Street specifically, to bring that towards the sidewalk.
But now it's gotten higher, so.
Right,
Yeah.
understood. And so the thought was, and just to tell you how this was developed over time, the discussion of the height and how that interacts with the way, and that's where you see that setback on the fourth story, so that when you're on, and I'm not calling out specifically this project, but in general, when on Main Street, it feels that human scale through the design guidelines to try and break up that first story, and then also break up the 3 to 4. So it feels like a 3-story building with that fourth setback on much of it. This one, perhaps we need a little more work on, but that's the intent of that zoning.
You look at this picture here, and, it looks like downtown Boston. This building, and it is, you said, it's a beautiful building. This building, I don't think it's right for downtown Hyannis, okay? You're using every inch of that property. You're not, you can do some open space there. It's parking lot and building. And that's not the essence of Main Street. It's fine for Lowell, it's fine for Boston. I do not think this building is right for downtown Hyannis. And as I said, if just look at 255 Main Street, how nicely that was done. It was done in colors. It fit the vibe of Main Street. This, to me, this looks like a dormitory right here, to me. And I don't think it belongs in downtown Hyannis.
Any other commissioners?
Yeah.
Commissioner
May I?
Hinckley Needham.
Like on this picture, I don't know what slide that is, but it doesn't look so, I know that's the other side of it. And is that what you said was as tall as the old building that you're going to demolish was? The height's the same? I know you said there was a line, but I didn't see that line. So is this building really only as high as the building that you're going to demolish? No, it's much higher.
No. It's our tallest peak is around 50 feet, although the majority of the building is right around 40, 43. The existing building from the sidewalk is just shy of 30 feet, which is this solid dashed line right here.
Okay.
Just if I may, I just had a question about, do you have any data with regard to the demand for housing? I speak to a lot of businesses. I'm friendly with a lot of folks who own businesses, run businesses in the area. Their consistent complaint is that their people have nowhere to live. So you have people coming from off Cape. It's a long drive, gas, everything else. Do you have any data about that?
We have internal data from our management company. We have all the articles and all the things that you're describing. As we move through the process, we'll do a formalized market study. But we don't have a formalized market study yet. If you wish us to come back and give you some internal data, we're happy to do that. But all feedback has been as you described, the strong demand. So
I think this.
Commissioner Colley, if I could just add to that, I do have some data, that I can provide, and Commissioner Doherty, thank you. I appreciate the compliments with regard to 255 and Pleasant Street. Those two properties are at 0 vacancy, right? and long wait lists. So I think I can speak from experience of having developed and now representing developers here and working with HPCC, Housing Protect Cape Cod. We know that half the workforce, and this is hard data, this is the Concord Group study that was done, and it's available on the HPCC website. We know that half of the workforce, more than half of the workforce here on the Cape, is coming from over the bridges. And that is what leads to the businesses being closed, including during the summer. Restaurants being closed 1 or 2 days a week. Restaurants that had been open throughout the year, and throughout the day, being closed for lunches. And I think you'll hear that from some of the folks that are here to speak, in support. And just if I could just speak to the contrast. So both 255 and Pleasant Street were developed before the form-based code was put in. And having been part of the groups that participated in the development and the reasons for the development of the form-based code and why it ended up at the allowing the 4 stories, it was to bring both the number of units that you're going to hear from folks today to meet that demand and bringing that to Main Street. But another important and why 255 and Pleasant Street are very different projects from this. You heard the depth of the scale of affordability that's able to bring, and being able to bring majority of the units at the affordable and deeply affordable levels is only possible when codes allow with guidelines and good design to develop at this kind of a scale. So this is going to be a very transformative project for Main Street, far more transformative than 255 or Pleasant Street or anything else that was developed and conceived before the form-based code. And I think, again, with good design and with good comments and feedback is how developers and the community are able to balance those needs. And I think, again, we're all here tonight for that purpose. And I wanted to make those points and to provide you with that firsthand data.
Thank you very much. Any other commissioners with questions? Commissioner Kay.
Yeah, I have a question about the occupants of this project. It looks to me like this is working folks. There's a focus here for a lot of young people. Is there any provision in here for daycare? Do we have anything at all here for school bus, for pickups, for all this kind of stuff? The occupants of this are likely to be families or partial families or single parents and stuff like that. And it looks to me like all of this is geared for working people and people that are pretty busy. So I'm interested in where or if there's any provisions in your plan for the young people that are going to be here that are kids and students and stuff like that.
I might have an answer for you on that if I can confirm with our staff. I think what happened, because there's probably not a lot of kids that come from Main Street forward that need the school buses. I would assume, and I'm going to ask staff for clarification, that if there, as you say, a lot of kids come from there, then the schools would adjust their school routes as they do every year to accommodate students. That would be my anticipation. Is that not correct?
No, that's absolutely correct. Yes, the wind development, if they were to proceed, would work with the superintendent and the school system to develop a plan. But there is children already that got picked up on Main Street today, and the school bus stops and scoops them up. So there may be an additional percentage of children. As you heard, there's a small percentage of 3-bedrooms. So honestly, in doing this a long time, this number of units, I wouldn't expect a significant number of children to be there, but certainly there certainly will be children, and they would work with the school system to get that.
We also talk about, housing is so important, which it is, but it's not all in Hyannis. We can check the records. I think we have this year over 800 units being built in Hyannis. And I don't know the number, but I would probably say most of that is affordable. And what we're missing, and Rob, you and I had a talk about it years ago, is a disappearing middle in Hyannis. And again, I see what you're trying to do here, but again, it's not the essence of Cape Cod. And that's what I have against this project. But I understand about the housing. This isn't the only housing we have going in Hyannis. We have 800 units going in this year in Hyannis to help people in restaurants and all over the Cape. So, again, mine's strictly the design for Hyannis.
Any others before I have some?
I just wanted to say really quickly. To be honest with you, the no playground doesn't bother me as much as a block and a half down. We have the beautiful Hyannis Green that the kids can come and play and kick balls around and throw balls around or whatever. So that's not that big of a deal for me. Many apartment complexes don't have daycares, so that doesn't really bother me as well. But maybe when it comes to the school bus route, and again, I didn't know that buses came down Main Street to pick up kids, but maybe you could make the bus pickup on Old Colony instead of on Main Street. And maybe that would be a better way to do that instead of stopping the bus right on Main Street as people kind of, come down a busy street, especially because we're about to, go two-way and stuff like that. So that's just a couple of quick things.
Any other commissioners with questions? Did you have something?
Just if I could get a clarification on our mission.
The mic is not on.
It is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure. Just I'm curious. We're talking about important things, but our bus routes and childcare and playgrounds, are those within the purview of our responsibilities? That's my only consideration.
Good point there. Jim, were you trying to say something before I?
Yeah, thank you. I did want to reiterate. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. We're talking about architectural features, and so the hope is for the town to have a decision rendered from this commission that reflects that the appropriateness of the architectural features. And with that, there are a couple of items that I've had the benefit of looking at this for some time now. So I did have a couple of architectural features that I wanted to just volley out to this commission. Yep. Sorry.
And if I could ask you to please, in that, because this is going to be one of the things I was going to start off with, is to ask you to review that also in relation to the guidelines and the form-based code guidelines, new stuff, and everything else, so that we're all clear. Thank you.
Sure.
And then I'll go into mine.
Excellent. So a few things. Again, this is just under my review. Just wanted to offer for your consideration, and you guys can further discuss this as the night goes on. But so first off, obviously, as we're looking here, Typically, this board has looked at materials for siding and clapboard. While the composite has been approved in the past, we typically, or this commission typically prefers the horizontal over the vertical, and so they do have a mixture of those, but just for food for thought, there's a lot of vertical here, and if that's something that this commission would like to adjust accordingly. I think as Commissioner Clark had mentioned, he was questioning this shingle versus clapboard, and whether for those sections, those elevations, you would prefer one solid, consistent element there, whether it be shingles across for that elevation face or siding. In terms of, Matt, if you could go to that next one showing like the three, yeah, perfect. With this here, I've had a lot of time to reflect on this one, and my suggestions or considerations would be, it's missing that trim, that extra element, that extra detail, and just for your consideration. So you see already some of that blue thick trim underneath the window and above the window. Perhaps that could be white. Perhaps we could start talking about corner trim as well, and also the roof lines, the gables. They're thin, and historically we've always kind of pushed for that thickness and maybe some detail to that. As the applicant had mentioned, so that bottom row of windows. So if you're thinking about the site plan, that's actually parking back there. So underneath the building on the first story, that's parking there. So I understand building code very likely is requiring that perforated metal, but my initial reaction was chrome perforated metal. Really, it doesn't seem to fit. So I don't know what materials are out there for that, but certainly it's something to consider. The massing of the roof line is, they've done in my opinion, a good job of adding dormers and gable, but there's no features. And I looked just next door. And there's a lovely cupola on there, and obviously the church across the street. And maybe there's some element on the roof line that they could provide there. Maybe not to each one of these roof lines, but maybe one or two of them. The blues, the consistent blues, in talking with a number of folks, that was somewhat of a concern for folks, the repetitiveness, and perhaps, I've seen it done great, well in like Marblehead and elsewhere where they, it's one historic color, then another historic color, then another historic color. So perhaps the consideration, we have that refined color chart in the proposed guidelines. Perhaps they could take three that kind of marry each other, perhaps. And then let's see, the massing along the front there. So it does set back some, but to Commissioner Doherty's point, there is kind of that flatness to it, and perhaps there is some opportunity for, as each elevation appears, maybe some furthering of the depth there. That's the one item that I really see in the new guidelines, that it doesn't quite meet the mark. We talk about 7 feet of depth, and this doesn't quite meet that mark. So perhaps the applicant could get closer to that number in order to get to create that uniqueness there and that separation of massing. And then lastly, in terms of pedestrian activity, great graphic. Matt, if you don't mind going back, yeah, right there to that one. Great graphic showing the pedestrian activity. Would love to see that sidewalk on Old Colony included in this site plan. As if you notice in the site plan, it's not actually in there. So it would be great to add that sidewalk there, because I think that's what this is all about, Main Street, and that's exactly what Main Street is. I mean, our zoning specifically says make this a walkable, pedestrian-oriented downtown environment, and creating that with some additional landscaping. And lastly, just food for thought, that corner there where it shows people congregating and sitting, for your consideration, as opposed to sitting benches and maybe a pocket seating area, maybe it's more green, and maybe more taller green too, and maybe that makes that building break up a little bit, but also just adds more life and natural environment to the area. So those are my initial comments just for food for thought. Thank you.
One of the reasons I tend to go, any others before? One of the reasons I tend to go last is because you guys tend to go ahead and do a lot of it for me. And Jim, you touched a lot of the points I was going to touch on. And I'm going to go back to the commissioners if there's any other questions that they formulate with regard to the presentation after I say my little piece. And then after that, if someone can please make sure I do not forget to read the correspondence that we have received on that, because that's important as well. And Felicia, yours, I'm not going to, it's part of what you're going to say, presumably, so I will just address that there is one from you. Okay. So, I do think it was a fabulous presentation. I do like the building very, very much. I do think there are some things to be tweaked. Some quick fire-off questions is you say usually it's long-term that you stay involved, which I think is great, rather than just building it, handing it over, and going away. Is 15 to 20 years the usual time, or is it longer than that, longer term, or is that about right? You mentioned 15 to 20 years.
15 to 20 years is a pretty good middle ground period of time. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, a lot of the financing is prohibitive to transfer before year 15. Okay. So that becomes sort of the starting point for these type of assets or communities to be sold. But again, that's a minimum. We end up holding those for a lot longer.
Next couple questions are for you, though, for what you presented, so you might want to stay there. You mentioned that, correct me if I'm wrong, that all the different levels and all the different rooms are the same except for the number of rooms, is that correct? Or bedrooms, number of bedrooms, is that correct?
So I was describing the fact that whether the unit or the bedroom or the community space is an affordable unit versus a middle income versus a market, it's the same square footage, it's the same fit and finish. So cabinets, countertops are the same, and then they're equally dispersed throughout the building. Okay. So you don't end up with the market rate units, call it on the top floor with the views. They get an equal distribution based on the number of units. The idea is that there's no differentiation between the unit types.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And I did write down the differentiations and that. I thought that was well presented. You've already, I think, Commissioner Hinckley-Needham, it was you that brought up the slide 15, which is the building comparisons. Do we need to see that again? If we could bring that up, please. So that clarifies it, just so we could. So that's compared to the town hall, the Federated Church, which is opposite side of the street and slightly up, but not very much up. So most of that is steeple as well. So the steeple will still be seen above, and I like that. The materials, I do think, is something. Commissioner Crowley and Commissioner Clark, you brought both of those up. I also had down the trim. Possibly to lighten it. We are supposed to do our very best to try to promote the historic character. I think possibly breaking that up. You stole some of my words from me, Jim. That's all right. You had mentioned balconies, but I don't see any balconies there as such. I think that might help with the historic on some of those windows to have, not huge walkout balconies, but you have the artificial, just the something that gives more of a, that you can possibly put a window box on or something when you open the windows.
Yeah, I
that
think
might
you're
give it more
referring to like a Juliet. I don't know that we had balconies in the plan. Is that?
Balconies
I don't think we
was
had them. I think
mentioned.
someone mentioned that we did. That's certainly some type of architectural element we could look at, but I don't think we proposed any balconies as part of our submission.
I'm just thinking it might improve the character and break up some
Understood.
of that. And I like the idea of the cupola. You got me on that one, Jim. I hadn't put that down. Corner trim, something like that. Just something to make it more historical. Commissioner Doherty, you mentioned the park and our playground, and I think you also mentioned the school buses, or was that was you, Commissioner Kay? I do think the town that is not our purview, but our purview is the safety, of the people. But I do think the town would step up if there were a lot more kids, and the schools would step up. I'm not worried about that. And the playground, the parks are, Bismore Park is just a hop, skip, and a jump away. It is a busy intersection. That intersection is up for a redevelopment itself. But I think the town would take care of that, you take into account what is there and to make sure that there's safety features. I also noted the 7-foot setback, so, something more in line with that. I am going to ask Jim to clarify the height conforming to, because that's been an issue before. So if you could clarify for us where we are on our current guidelines, because a lot of the people here also have been involved in other things, so just so that we have a clarification according to what things are now.
Absolutely. So it does meet the height standards. So we don't identify a maximum height, but we do identify a maximum floor, and each floor has a maximum height. So we do a roundabout way of getting to that point. But so 4 stories in this location on Main Street is allowed with that 4-story setback as shown, and then ground story. So for the first story, it cannot exceed 18 feet in height. Otherwise, then you're considered 2 stories. This one, for any residential structure, you're not going to get to any of these maximum heights here, and that's by design. So the first story can't exceed 18, and every upper story from there can't exceed 16 feet in height. So again, these don't get to those heights, and so therefore it meets the zoning. As mentioned, it is in similar height to that of the Churchcrest Street as well as Diagonal. They didn't mention it, but Diagonal, the housing authority, right there as well.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. The other thing I forgot to mention is there, as for the kids, there's also the green, which is just outside Town Hall here. There's also a playground, a small playground behind the library, which we approved. Just to clarify, the windows being double hung, and you said something about they're not really double hung, but they're going to look like they're double hung. Is that right? Did I misunderstand that?
You want to speak to how they operate? Yeah.
Yeah. With the current stretch energy codes that are in place in Massachusetts, we have to have a very high performing envelope. And the double hung windows just don't get us there. They look beautiful and they're great, but to meet the minimum requirements for those energy codes, we have to move to a casement type window. I don't know if any of you are familiar with, the European tilt turn style windows. That's kind of what I'm referencing, but we work with the window manufacturers to make sure all the profiles and such look like it is a double hung or a single hung window from the outside.
I understand. I lived in Europe for nearly 4 decades.
So you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. I would want a clarification on the lights, because there didn't seem to be anything specific. If we're going to go for some clarifications on trim, that would be something I would be interested in seeing addressed a little bit more. So I like the idea that it's going to be well lit and it looks well here, but just so we know what it is, if that could be further clarified. I was concerned, and it's been mentioned a couple times, with the ground floor, and I understand that's with regard to the cars, and you don't want people looking into the beautiful building and looking directly at cars and the metal. So if there's something that can be done with that, so it doesn't detract from the building, just something that could be addressed with that different type of appearance. I like the plants and the foliage and that sort of thing. I just ask, are a lot of those perennials, so we don't find it works for 1 year? And I mean, I know the trees are there, so they are going for perennials. Excellent. That adds to the character. Lights, balconies, data on traffic, materials, chrome cars. I think we got most of it. And I mentioned that our purview does have the character. A question for Jim again. When we had the guidelines presented to us and we went over it, did we, correct me if I'm wrong, did we not send a letter saying that we approved of those?
It's not approved at this time. It was recommended to move forward for public comment. So the guidelines are now out for public comment. There
That's
was
right.
recent press release for that. Thank you.
So we were okay enough. I just wanted to clarify. I knew we sent something out on that, so we did say that the guidelines, we that's right, it was for public comment. Okay, so I think that covers mine, and I thank you very much for opening up by saying you're very open to feedback. I don't want to, any commissioners have anything new that's come up before I go on to the correspondence and then public comment?
Does it have to be 120 units? You know, would you have, if you scaled it back, maybe it wouldn't look so massive, you know, and you'd have more room to do more open space and grass areas. I still would like to see it go to separate buildings. And another thing that I don't like on this design, I don't know what page this is, 305? This one here. You know, you look at, you got, the design work is all on Old Colony and Main Street, and the back buildings are just flat. Just absolutely no design whatsoever. So, that's all I got.
Actually, I had not noticed that. I would agree with the stuff that we're doing on trim and things like that and character, maybe put something back there to, you know, keep that character that you come up with coming forward. No objections? I'm going to go into correspondence. Okay. The first one, sent August 29th. This is from Elizabeth Worthbane. It says Elizabeth. I'm assuming that's Elizabeth Worthbane. Hi, and a copy to others. Hi, Jim. I'm traveling, but would like the following regarding the Wynn property read and communicated tomorrow. The Hyannis Main Street bid supports this excellent new project on Main Street as an example of best practices to support a thriving year-round economy. The model is progressive, what we need to offer to keep the backbone of young working families on Cape Cod. The location is perfect to allow people to live the village life, walking to everywhere that used to be so prevalent. The form-based code is a good tool to create predictability. The details are worked out on boards and committees. We support this project in the downtown. Thank you, Elizabeth. I am going to Chris Kuhn. All right. This is from Chris Kuhn. Dear Madam Chairwoman and members, will you please read these comments into the record? I will admit that I have not spent the time to read through all of the proposed regulations, which certainly seem to get very detailed and specific to the point of having every new building look virtually the same. The devil is clearly in the details. While I believe everyone is in agreement that the existing brick building is definitely not the best looking first impression visitors see as they enter our downtown. The only part is that at all inviting is the fact that it's set back further than most buildings on Main Street, which does create a nice green space. In skimming the documents, I did see the requirement that all, or as much of the parking lot as possible, be located to the rear of the buildings, which seems desirable, but which then forces the buildings to be very close to the street. The closest to the street is already very typical all along Main Street and seems to be appropriate and acceptable, given the height of the existing buildings, which are far from 3 or 4 stories. Having a 4-story or even a 3-story building close to the sidewalk is certainly indicative of a city block rather than a village Main Street. I guess it all depends on what kind of look and atmosphere they're trying to create. My personal view would be that wherever a 3 or 4-story building is to be built and the lot is large enough to accommodate its own required parking, the building should be as far from the street as possible and practical, and that the parking should be situated as far from the street and as close to the building as possible, with 3 or 4 foot high evergreen shrubs screening the parking lots from the street view. Ideally, it would be nice if the area between the street and the parking lots would be landscaped in an open park-like setting with trees, prunes high enough for people to walk amongst, similar to the trees we have on Main Street now, and which would also break up the view of a huge apartment building in the background. Although the further it is away, the smaller it will appear to be. The apartments would also enjoy a more private and more residential atmosphere, being further away from the busy street. Having 3 or 4 having 3 or 4-story buildings erratically scattered along a very close to Main Street is not going to be a very pretty sight at all. Our tourists coming into the town for the first time will be greeted with a massive 4-story building looming next to the road. That doesn't seem to make for a very nice first impression and not the warmest greeting for tourists who have never been here before. Don't get me wrong, the proposed building is not unattractive and it's certainly a huge improvement to what is presently there, but shouldn't the entrance to our only downtown shopping area be much more welcoming than being greeted by a huge apartment building? Main Street, Hyannis, is clearly one of our most important and valuable assets and truly a diamond in the rough in need of some polishing. This is the first of what may become many very tall and massive buildings along Main Street, and it will set the tone going forward. So it is paramount that the town gets it right. There's way too much at stake for us to make a mistake. We are only going to get one bite of the apple. Yeah, okay. Bite of this apple, excuse me. So let's make sure we don't get a worm. I wish you all the best of luck in trying to figure it all out. Regards, Chris Kuhn, K-U-H-N. All right, thank you, Mr. Kuhn. So, last chance for commissioners to make a comment before we go to the last of the correspondence. Felicia, I'm going to invite you. Is there a way we can do you want us to see if we can get this on the screen? Okay. So I'm going to open it up for public comment. Felicia, if you wanted to start.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I didn't need to go first, but thank you for that distinction. I have a few comments, and then we'll get to that sheet. This is the first project under the new zoning, so it's important to get it right, especially since this is a change of use. So going from a commercial bank to residential is a big difference. I know you're at the historic board, so parking is not your purview, but at some point in time, when parking does get discussed, there isn't enough. So, since you're concerned about the historical friendliness of this building and addressing that, this project has a demonstrable presence, as we all noted, on the corner. And I totally agree with Tom, and I will disclose fully that on Monday early afternoon, I did have like a Microsoft Teams call with the developer. Okay, so they've already heard some of these comments, so they're going to be very brief. I just wanted to get them into the record. Okay, I was very concerned that the building is so close to the corner. You know, for my lifetime anyway, there's been all that green space on the corner, the elevation going up the hill, and it gently kind of went into the presence of a commercial bank, which used to be all brick, and then they built all kinds of additions on it over the years. But it was set back, and you didn't notice it, and what you did see was the green. And for a while, they had landscapers maintaining it for them, and then they took it over, et cetera, et cetera. It's very difficult to adjust to this on that corner without that setback, without the green. Tom already mentioned that, and I would agree with him that is an issue. I definitely take issue with the siding interpretations. I think you need more brick, please, and details that are inherent in our historic buildings now. I don't like the mixture of materials. I have a house around the corner from me, 2 blocks away. It looks like a Colorado ski lodge. There's a lot of vertical siding. There's a metal roof. There's skinny, tall windows. It's right on the water, but it looks like a Colorado ski lodge, and it doesn't belong where it is, and I could say the same for this. I'm not opposed to multifamily housing on Main Street. I'm not opposed to, I like their mixed income models. You know, there's a lot of favorable things about this, but you guys are concentrating on the historic value of this and how it fits into the historic area, so that's why I'm talking about that. So the sheet that I forwarded to you, and I have given this to the developer before, you're obviously familiar with these buildings, but in my mind, and what's missing from Main Street, so to make it even more walkable, is a supermarket. So the top left building, which we know now as the empty Alberto's first location, and before that, the Edna Hibble Gallery, and before that, something else, and before that, the A&P. Okay, so that was a perfect location for a supermarket, so people could actually walk from the Tree Streets and from Winter Street and from Barnstable Road and from Main Street and get their groceries and didn't need a car and could walk home. We don't have a supermarket on Main Street, and I mentioned it to these guys behind me because when you talk about a walkable, pedestrian-friendly Main Street, you need a supermarket or fresh vegetables anyway, okay? And I don't see that happening anywhere here. So let's just talk. All these buildings have a presence on Main Street. The one next to them, the Cape Cod Times, and behind that, obviously, we know that those are condominiums. That's all brick. It has a great cupola, which was mentioned before. The A&P has this cool round circle window at the top of the eave there. My architectural terms are not up to date. The trim on the Bass River Savings Bank, the old, so the port, the foreign international food building on the corner of Barnstable Road and Main Street is important. The little portico, the Masonic Lodge, which is now Chez Antoine, which I know Jim frequents twice a day, maybe more, I don't know. Real important there with the trim at the top and the windows and all that stuff, especially our original town hall, the current JFK Museum, the trim at the top of that and the brickwork, et cetera, et cetera. All these buildings are the flavor of Main Street to me. Yes, they're all commercial uses. Some have been converted, like the Masonic Lodge, like the Cape Cod Times building, to residential. And there might even be apartments up over the where the jewelry factory for Girton Brothers used to be, over the food store. I'm not really sure. So I'm putting my bid in, and I showed those examples because to me, something like this, as demonstrative as it is, and an entranceway and a gateway to Main Street, needs to reflect that flavor that's been existent and part of us since the 1800s in this town. So I'm voting for more brick, please, and less mixtures if possible. And I had written on here, are there flat roofs on some wings? We just saw that there were. And I'm just saying no thank you to that can be done much better. I want to remind everybody that zoning suggestions are minimums to meet as far as landscaping and things go. So you're always invited to plant more. Lack of shade trees here are a concern. I like Tom's observation about the lack of playground or running around space and stuff. Yes, you could walk to the village green, but what if your kid's 3 years old and they want to go out the door and run around? Maybe they can't be crossing the street by themselves. It's a really busy place for little kids to be out and about alone. And you know, when a little kid wants to go, they go. They don't ask permission, they just go, all right? So it'd be nice if there's an area for them to do something. As far as the data on housing go, you guys were close with 800, but there's over 1,000 multifamily units that have been built or are planned or in the pipeline in Hyannis alone, not including the 35 Scudder project, okay? So it does include Everly, it does include the project behind the CUDA Center now, et cetera, et cetera. It includes Sea Captain's Row, et cetera, et cetera. But since 2017, there are over 1,000 just in Hyannis. So if you want housing data, that came from, Jim can give you all that sheet. It's a residential sheet, and it's on the web. So I've said my piece, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Hope you'll consider it.
Okay. Felicia, you did sign in, right? Okay, and the reason I put you first is because I had you under correspondence. So that's all the correspondence that we have, but there's obviously other members of the public who would like to talk for public comment. Yes, please, if you could come up, sign in, and state your name, please, for us.
Good evening. I'm Chuck Villa. I've been a 40-year resident of Barnstable. I'm also a business owner in Main Street. I own the West End Restaurant at the West End Rotary. I've also had a unique opportunity to work for a public company in Greenville, South Carolina for the last 20 years, and so I think I can bring a unique perspective to the downtown. So just starting with the restaurant, we're operating about 20% of the time in our restaurant. We don't have the staff or the help to run lunches or 7 days a week. We have the demand, but we can't get the people because they can't find housing. And we've got a handful of people that are driving as far away as off Cape, to probably an hour each way. So they're spending 2 hours on the road to get to our restaurant. We had one employee who started with us 7 years ago, and he moved to Florida because he couldn't find a house, and then he had a family, a baby, and he came back up because he missed his family and missed working with us, and we're struggling to try to find a good place for him to live. So housing is a desperate need for merchants and people in the service industry on Hyannis. The unique perspective I think I bring is I've worked in South Carolina in Greenville, and when I got there 20 years ago, it was a abandoned mill town, and drugs and prostitution and whatever. There are all these abandoned buildings, and the Mayor Knox White, had started a couple years before I got there, and he's still the mayor today, and it's now become the 5th best small downtown in America. And I brought him up to Hyannis this summer to spend some time with the town folks. And he walked through the town and he said, here's how I did it. I started with housing and downtown. I asked merchants to put 2 apartments above their retail, went to 4, went to 8, and today we have probably 5,000 apartments, condos, and townhomes in downtown Greenville. And it went from Blythe to 100 privately run restaurants, 3 or 4 grocery stores. I mean, the demand was there, and it comes after you get the people. You can't put a grocery store, but you have the people. It's got a beautiful performing arts center. It's got a ballpark that they put in that's a single-A affiliate to the Red Sox. And he's 25 years into this development, and it's an amazing place. And it's only a 2-mile downtown. We're a 1-mile downtown, so it's not, it's not a lot different than what Hyannis is. And Hyannis could be a great city for Cape Cod. And I'm pretty tired. I've been here for 40 years of us being the parking lot for the islands. I want people to come here and stay here. I want hotels and restaurants that they can stay at and go to the islands for a day, but stay here. So that's my 2 cents. I'm in favor of this proposal, and I think we need more just like it. And I think these people are wonderful people. The work that they've done is amazing. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak for public comment?
Good evening, friends. My name is John Julius. I'm a resident of Hyannis. Been here now over 20 years. My wife and I live a couple blocks from the backside of Main Street. Absolutely love Hyannis. I wish I could share some of the enthusiasm that's come here tonight, but unfortunately I cannot. I agree with Tom. I agree with pretty much most, if not all, of what Felicia said. I stand before you, and I do understand that some of what I'm about to say may not fall within your purview, but I'm going to say it anyway because it needs to be said. You've heard that Hyannis has somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 units. There happen to be 7 villages in the town of Barnstable. Hyannis is one village. We now have close to 20,000 people jammed into Hyannis alone. The town of Barnstable has 50,000 residents, and almost a third of them are packed right here in Hyannis.
I don't know how much you know about the water deficits that are facing us right now and water deficits that are about to come in the next 12 to 15 years. So we'll be lucky if we have water if this continues. Quite honestly, I was in the building business in the 80s and got out of building in 1993. I worked for a builder and we built 114 condos back in 1985 over in Yarmouth called Foxwood. 114 condos that we built, two-bedroom condos, that today they're beautiful. Those 114 condos were built on 114 acres. And we were basically almost tarred and feathered because we, like the builders, Nick Franco and other builders back in the 80s, were destroying the Cape. Builders were raping the Cape. Now here we have this glorious entity, if you will, comes into town, and they present to us that they're going to give us this much-needed housing. I have news for you. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts makes a recommendation. It's not a mandate. It's a recommendation that every town, 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, and the Commonwealth recommends that every city and town do their best to try to achieve 10% affordable housing. Last I knew, 250 cities and towns in Massachusetts do not have 10%. They're all doing just fine. You think that when the town council, selectmen in the towns of Weston, Wellesley, Needham, when they talk about affordable housing, I happen to sell real estate here. I've sold 6,000 homes in my last 39 years, and I'm proud of my career. I have nothing against housing, but right now, we're at a critical point. Why? Because we can't handle the water, especially Hyannis, which is overloaded. What about the wastewater? Nobody wants to believe that there happens to be this plume from the sewer treatment plant over on Route 28. Well, I can tell you, my good friend, the late Gary Lopez, and I did a lot of research on that. And that's still going on and only going to get worse. So I'd love to be able to, again, share the enthusiasm, but Hyannis now has somewhere closing in now on 20% affordable housing. In my opinion, for what it's worth, you want to build more housing, then do it in the other 6 villages. Because if you continue, and this, you know, that's wonderful. Felicia mentioned there's no supermarket. I would mention to all of you, I wish there were a statute in this Commonwealth that said, whether it's these developers or anybody else coming into town and saying, hey, I want to build 100 units. I'll dedicate 50% of those as affordable. And then I wish there was a statute that said, okay, yes, we'll allow this on one condition, that the 50% affordable units are going to be the residences of people that we can guarantee are A, here from the local community, and B, are actually going to work the service jobs that gentleman just mentioned a few minutes ago. But the hard reality is that doesn't happen. I can tell you, I drive around a lot. It doesn't happen. One of my great fears is, yeah, you build 120 units. What happens when the developer from Nantucket wants to come over and rent 15 of those units and put 6 of them employees in it? You think that's going to help our water woes in the next 12 to 15 years? You know, there's an apartment complex. I've followed it over the years because I don't live far from there, 67 C Street in Hyannis. I would encourage any one of you to drive by there on a Sunday night, because that's an apartment complex. They're apartments. There are so many cars over there, they park on the side roads. So here, you have 120. Where are these people going to park in this building? I guess I'll end my comments once again, I'll thank you for what you do. I understand it's not easy. But those are just, I could stand here for the next 15 minutes, and I don't want to. I know you guys, everyone wants to go home. But to me, these are huge concerns. Water, wastewater, the traffic. If somebody wants to try to convince me that 120 units, oh, don't worry, you know, a lot of those people won't have a car. Really? Is that really what you think? I don't know when the last time some of you have driven down West Main Street. I happen to go up and down there probably 3 or 4 times a day. You seen the traffic on West Main Street? So traffic's another thing I didn't even touch upon. And again, I don't want to take up your night. But those are the concerns, and those should be concerns to all of you. You all live in the town of Barnstable. And if anyone here lives in Hyannis, maybe some of what I just said might resound with some of you, because Hyannis is being totally destroyed. 1,000 new units, so what are we going to have? 55,000 people and 30,000 are going to all be crammed into Hyannis, and that supposedly somehow is a good thing? Thank you again for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much for speaking with us and sharing your views. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Okay, good evening. It's getting quite late, so I won't speak too long. My name is Susan Batista, and I recently purchased a building at 525 South Street on the west end of Hyannis, and I'm thrilled to be part of this community. I've been coming to Hyannis for many, many years before I decided to buy that building. I decided to be in Hyannis because it's such a vibrant, wonderful, walkable main street. I love the historic nature of it. I love the diversity of it and everything you guys are doing to protect that. So thank you for all of that. I also come to that transportation center and look across the street and see this empty void with people trying to, roll their suitcases, and there's no sidewalk there. And it's a very unwelcoming moment that leads you into beautiful Hyannis. So when I look at this building, it takes my breath away. I just imagine people coming into Hyannis and seeing this beautiful building and saying, what a beautiful city. It evokes freshness to me. It evokes the sea and the harbor and a city that really wants to include everyone. I look around the room tonight and I see a lot of people like me that have a little bit of gray hair. Some of us cover it up. But when you're a young person, you want to live in a building that looks like this. The most sustainable way that we live in this community is in housing that's together. The most unsustainable way we could possibly live is in single-family houses with yards. So I look at this and say it's sustainable, it's wonderful for our environment by having density, by having people walk, and the idea that you would walk down Main Street and see this beautiful building just really makes me so happy to be part of your community. So thank you for all of your work. And I am really in favor of this beautiful building and what it will bring and what it will mean for our beautiful town. So thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. Any other members of the public to speak in public comment? Yes. Sorry, there were two. It's all right. Mary Ann, you're next. That's right. It's pointing the same way.
I didn't see her. She was behind me. I'm Conrad Watson, and I own this property. When I purchased it, 3 days after I purchased it, I was offered 4 times what I paid for a methadone clinic. And, we have Rob sitting here who really, there was a death spiral going on in the East End here, and he stopped it with his project. And that's basically what I want to say outside of the purview. But as far as the building goes, this is like a wood frame structure, and I see it being shingles and clapboard and painted like a light gray with white trim, white sash. You have a dock roof. Dock roofs attract seagulls, and so I'd like to see a light gray or a white roof. If you're going to do brick, I think the whole thing would have to be brick. But I think, you know, and is brick really realistic on a project like this? I think they've done a great job designing this, and I look forward to, I work right across the street now, so looking out and seeing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Ann, you're up.
So Mariana Agresti, a business owner on Main Street and an architect. I am also on the team that's helping to design the exterior space. I have, for 17 years that I've been on Main Street, been a big part of the business improvement district and helped have to design kiosks and sculpture. So they've asked that I contribute not to the building itself, but I just want to be full disclosure that I am part of the team for some of the green space. We're at the very beginning of those conversations, so there's nothing to report in that front. So that said, as a citizen of this community, there are some things that I've had an opportunity to talk to the group about because I can't help myself at the meetings, and they've been very, very open to hearing what my comments as an architect. We've sort of, just for the record, these are things that have already been discussed. I think, like Felicia, I've had conversations with the team. But for the record, I wanted to be sure that they were said tonight. We all talk about this as being a gateway to the building, but I think that when people come across from the transportation center, there's been some discussion about what they're greeted by. For me, this isn't necessarily as welcoming to a visitor or someone who doesn't live in the building as it potentially could be. One of my first questions was why there wasn't actually commercial space on the first floor of this building, because it seems to me that that's where a information center or even a market, as Felicia mentioned, could and should be. But I understand that the zoning, the form-based zoning, actually does not require that in this block. So which I was very, very disappointed to hear. It seems to me that that was a mishap, perhaps, in the zoning. So I would encourage there to be some consideration of how the first floor could be used. We have talked about cladding materials, and some people have already brought up these comments, but to underscore them, I think that when, not necessarily historic architecture, but what I like to call timeless architecture, I think is what we're after here. Not something that looks like it was built this year, and we can't pretend to have it look like something that was built in 1920s. We're not going to have that happen either. But there are certain features of buildings that have characteristics that will work within the characters of our street. We have talked, like Felicia did, about how some of the features of cupolas already exist on our street and really do define our street. So perhaps there's an opportunity to integrate that. I'm interested particularly in how that might happen on the corner tower. I keep thinking about the cash block and how that, being one of our first commercial buildings, actually did have a corner cupola on it that burned down and was never replaced. Not only do I want the people who own that building to put it back where it was, but there are historical references on our street for those sorts of features. We have talked about the cladding and how, although it's really wonderful that they have tried to integrate different sorts of cladding like shingles, vertical siding, but that maybe they wouldn't be accented features, which makes, I think people have talked about how it looks flat, and that the way they're inserted actually contributes to the flatness of the facade. And maybe think about how we've, in some of the other buildings, I think Pleasant Street does this well, use those materials to accent volumes instead of flat places, which would actually, I think, give the building the depth that some people say it seems to be lacking. In terms of the brick, there is a small brick feature at the base of the building, which seems perhaps a little gratuitous at this point. And if we're going to use that material, maybe enhance the building, maybe at the corner, to allow that first story to be a real brick moment, allowing it to be a bit more formal. We've talked about how the corner seems informal. To me, this is the head that sort of holds the building down, and the two arms sort of do this, right? And that we could sort of think about the head being a bit more detailed and allowing the arms to be secondary. So a building of this scale and of this size has a primary and a secondary moment. I totally agree with the trim. We've talked about that. I think really looking carefully at trim details, so there's shadows and some depth to the facades would be really important. I'm sorry to hear about not sorry to hear about the calculations on heating, because I understand that to be incredibly important and support that. But it's too bad to have all these casement windows, because when they're open, we can compare it to Paris, but it's not going to look like that, right? It's going to be a little bit kind of fussy, right? But I'm not going to debate that, because the windows look beautiful the way they are in the facade. Let's see. So we've talked about the corner tower, the cash block. Materials. I think the word, the plantings have all been talked about as native, but I do know we're making a huge effort to create a pollinator pathway along Main Street, so it'd be nice if those words were specifically used in the landscape suggestions so we can integrate it into all the work that's been done. So in general, I think that's it. I mean, there's a lot to think about in a building of this size. We've talked about maybe trying to scale down the gable end there, maybe with a hipped roof. So there's sort of something that seems a bit more modest, but yet more formal at the corner. And today it was even mentioned that there are examples of buildings this large on small places like Block Island and Martha's Vineyard, right? These big old inns that are lovely and are iconic and actually have a real character. And maybe looking at some of those features as precedents would assist this building. So thank you for all of your time, and I'm glad to be contributing to the exterior space of this building because Main Street really needs that as well.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Just staff to confirm, when you made a comment about the commercial space on the first floor, I don't think we actually have purview over use. Is that correct?
Right. Use is certainly zoning, but understood in terms of the zoning. The zoning does require commercial space from Ocean west, but it doesn't require commercial space towards the east. That was during the development. I'm not sure.
But I steer us away from it because it's not our purview, correct? Yes, just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to explain it to you, Marianne, why it is we don't touch on use, because it's not on our under our purview. Sorry, go ahead, please, if you need.
For better or worse, there's a lot of things discussed here that aren't under your purview. So I thought it was really important to bring up.
I respect that totally. Anyone else for public comment from the public? Yes. Ms. Lucky, Town Councilor Lucky.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Betty Ludke, and I, like Felicia, had an opportunity to have a Microsoft team meeting with Ramey Schneider. She was very generous with her time, and I appreciate that. And one thing that she and I discussed that they didn't present here, and I'm not sure why, is they're proposing a roof deck. And I think that speaks to some of Tom's concerns, because that was my concern as well, Tom. I think you brought up some good points. I'm always concerned about families and having safe spaces for them to play. And I talked to Ramey about the City Museum, which is in St. Louis, which is an amazing place. I don't know if anybody else has ever been there. But their rooftop is a giant playground. It doesn't mean just for children to play, but adults as well. And I don't know if that's still part of the design? Yes. They're nodding yes. I think that would have helped you to have that presented this evening, because it's an incredible feature, and I love it, and I think it would be a great addition. And it gives these people in this apartment building something very special, especially with the views that are going to be afforded. And it would give some life. I know there were several comments, the blandness of the backside. This roof deck will really bring some life to that and give some beautiful space for these tenants, some safe space. We've had such good comments tonight. I'm also a town councilor, and Cheryl mentioned earlier in the meeting, I am the liaison. And I bear an incredible amount of responsibility for what we're talking about tonight. This came before us as the town council to vote on. So many of the town councilors who had business interests or property in Hyannis had to recuse themselves, that 100% of us that did not have to recuse had to vote for this. We all had to support it. And we did. And it meant we didn't have the business interests in here. But, and John Julius, your passion is always welcome. I love it. And then we've heard from Chuck Villa, a business owner, and that passion there. Marianne, your comments are incredible. What an architect you are. I mean, so insightful, everything the way you describe it. Susan, thank you for your enthusiasm and coming into the community. So, as I said, we all had to vote for it. So what if you vote for something and you ask somebody to do it and then they do it? And you say, wait a second, ooh, is this really what we intended? And that's why I think we're having some of the pull and push here tonight. And it's absolutely essential that we have this pull and push tonight, because this is the first project out of the starting blocks. And we need to get it right, and we need to appreciate all the voices we've heard tonight. And we also had some very good letters written. Chris Kuhn, thank you. I've seen Chris Kuhn on the Nextdoor app. He speaks beautifully and writes beautifully, and he always brings up very good information. So what I would say is, here's what I love about this. I love that they came forward and they did comply pretty much to the letter, and I think Jim has pointed that out, to our form base. There are a couple of misses. The 7-foot has been mentioned. I noticed that from our guidelines. And I think it's important, because these guidelines are right on the cusp of being approved, that this building conform to the guidelines. The other thing Jim mentioned is the horizontal versus the vertical. And I know in the guidelines we talk about the horizontal massing of the materials. I think this building is too edgy with the vertical accentuation. I think it's too edgy for what we're trying to do. And we've had several speakers tonight mention Hyannis as a city. That's a bit of a conundrum. We do have a city form of government, but Hyannis is one of the 7 villages, and we've had, again, John Julius mention that to us. But the other villages are very precious. Hyannis, right or wrong, has become something maybe it didn't want to be, but it is, because we've had development, and it's been driven by developers. And what's nice about this is we're driving this. We asked for this. I voted for it, and now we're getting that. And the huge component of this is the 2/3 affordability component of it. That's enormous. You normally don't get that unless you're doing a 40B. And every time anyone mentions 40B, people, are running for the hills, and there's terror and there's horrible things happening, because sometimes it's a little bit hostile to do a 40B. But I don't find 40Bs frightening at all, because I think they give us the affordability component we want. And this one is going above and beyond. It's really 2/3 affordable. So that's huge. And also they mentioned their business model. They're not like some of the other developers we've seen come into town. They're going to stick with it. They have the ability in their backspace, or their back offices, if you will, to run the lotteries. So we don't have the delays we've seen in some of the other developments where they're built and then, 18 months later we don't have anybody in. Well, we didn't have anybody to run the lottery. They have that capability. So I like that. That's a positive too. Again, Marianne, my God, hopefully all of that went into your brains, because everything she said was beautiful. And I want to go back to what Tom said. Do we need 120 units? And when I look at this, it's a little bit too much. And Marianne mentioned the corner being the head, and again, she gave a beautiful analogy there. Perhaps the 4th floor could disappear there in the corner. Because it rises up, and it's just so much. We get rid of a unit there, and you come down there, and you do some more work there. We lose 1 unit, and that would give that corner, I think, something. It could even be another roof deck there, which would be spectacular to, again, have some movement there on the corner. What else? Just, again, so many good comments. And I don't want to lose, again, what folks like John say, and then, the business people like Chuck. I think brick, I don't know if I talked about that. Conrad, you're amazing. I consider you just really a dynamic person and a great addition to the community, and you've brought us this, and it's fantastic, and your developer is top-notch. But I'm going to disagree with you on the brick. There's so much brick here, and I think if we did, again, have the horizontal brick on the first floor, we could have something. And there's something nice about the red brick, especially because it's tactile. You can relate it to a person. Some of these finishes here, they don't relate to a person. Something I can hold in my hand and I have a relationship with. So I'd like to see the brick in here. And other than that, again, I think we need this. I will mention the parking. I had a meeting with Mr. Els the other day, talking about this specific issue, the parking associated with this. The 120 units, 120 spaces, the preponderance of them for compact vehicles. We say we're doing for workers. Most of the workers I know who live in my precinct work in the trades. If they're married, both people work. There's 2 cars. A lot of the cars are not cars, they're work vans and trucks. We have a lot of problems with overloading. In my neighborhoods, we have ranch houses that have 8 vehicles parked, work trucks parked, because that's how people are living. So the people who've stood up there and say we need housing, there's no argument, we need housing. And that would alleviate some of that. It would get maybe some of those people out of the family neighborhoods, if you will. A lot of my constituents are very concerned that we're losing the fabric of our family neighborhoods because the houses are being sold, and because we don't have the housing, we have a lot of single people, workers living in there. So that would alleviate. But I told Mr. Els, we don't have the parking. When we did the code, and again, I voted on it, it was a concern of mine, and this is going to really come out at us and maybe validate if we got it right or we didn't get it right. But we have a piece of property behind this that has some parking, and I think we as a town have put that on the street to sell. And I said, Mr. Els, pull that back, because we're going to need that for the parking for this to supplement it. And, you know, he had some very good comments, and he said, you know, we have so much asphalt in this town, and he's right. And we have to be creative maybe with the parking and have some sort of maybe network, have some places. We've got to meet people where their needs are. You know, not everybody is going to be driving, you know, a compact car, maybe an electric car. They're going to be still work vans. And we need as a town to meet that need and maybe have a shared parking lot. So that's the kind of thing we need to think of going forward. If this is what we want on Main Street, and I do support it, I like the density, but we have to also meet reality. I always like to say, we tend to design, or we think that everyone who lives here is coming from Stepford, Connecticut. They're not coming from Stepford, Connecticut. They're human beings, and they're very flawed, and they're living their lives, and we have to adjust to that. So again, I commend this. I voted for this. Here it is looking in front of me. I have some concerns, but by and large, I think if we tweak it with the beautiful comments we've heard here tonight, and we have sensitivity to those who are a little bit afraid, we will have something here. And the last comment was about, the people who mentioned the city. I don't want Hyannis to be a city, and I don't think, as my time on this board, any of you want it to be a city. We're a village, too. We're one of the 7 villages. And the thought that we're starting to make a city here is a little bit frightening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. Hello.
I'll be quick, I promise.
It's all right.
I was in Brighton earlier today, and there are 7 buildings like that in Brighton within a mile of where I own a condo. 7.
Can I get you to sign your name or sign and state your name for us, please?
Yes, my name is Eric Schwab. I live in Hyannis, West Hyannis.
Thank you. Sorry to have interrupted you.
Not a problem at all. I apologize. So if you want to look like Brighton, that's what Brighton looks like. If you want to look like Hyannis, you need to make this something else. You need at least 5 stoops. You need places where people can park their bikes. You need an entranceway on Main Street. It's not even a Main Street building, right? Are you going to keep the Main Street address? You can't. You get into it from Old Colony. So if you're going to make it a Main Street business building, put a nice cafe on the corner, put stoops every 30, 40 feet, put bike racks. Those trees, see those skinny little trees? Those trees are not representative of the trees we have here. I moved here in part because of the trees. Those are not the kind of trees that we have. Our trees are big and tall, and they're going to bump up against that building. So you need to think about what you want Hyannis to look like, and that's Brighton. Thank you.
Oops. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else for public comment? Yes, please.
I promise I'm going to be quick.
I couldn't hear. Sorry, could you make sure the mic's on?
I don't think that button is, the green button is
You
on.
need a green button.
Okay. I am Joseph Santos. I am the TDI fellow from Mass Development. I have been Hyannis resident for 1 year, and I know someone comment about the daters, and I am working specifically for Eastern Side for Main Street. I have more than 48 meetings for the last years with local residents and business, and I sit down with more the leaders for nonprofit and profit and leaders from organization here, more than 72 meetings. And beside this, I have a 1-1 for people living the eastern side of Main Street. And the question, the first request they have was housing. And you have a shortage in the hospital. The local business have a difficulty to retaining the employers, and they leave. They don't have a place to live. And I agree, we care about this, the architect and what Hyannis represent, for the 7 village, and it's beautiful. Main Street wasn't a place that people really care about the building, and they keeping the way historically. But in my opinion, I think you guys have to think about the connection, have a housing, people needing housing, and people who need a location to stay, to working, and I am in favor for the project. I'm a little nervous to speak in public. And I am in favor of this project, and I think we have to accelerate to decide, when you're going to start this project, because people need housing. I have hear from them, from the resident and the local business, and the people have a business, from people from the hospital. And I'm completely in favor. If you guys needing some data, I have some information from my meetings and from local residents.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Carlos, you had your hand up?
Is that a bit? So my name is Carlos Barbosa. I'm a small developer in town, and I own 535 South Street and 49 Center Street. So this is so important for us because our community needs housing. I understand Betty says a relationship with the building. The relationship I have with the building, you go in and live in it. So that's what I need to see all the community using something like that. We desperately need something like that. This is a beautiful building, and I'm totally in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else for public comment? Nope? Okay. So I'll leave public comment open until we go to motions. Commissioners, we've had the presentation, we've done our questions. I think we've all voiced what some of the concerns that we had and some of the things we thought might make it fit in a little bit better and with the character and everything. What I'm hearing, did you want to speak?
No, just up here to be prepared. I just,
Okay,
in terms of when, I think as you had mentioned, going then to demolition and then certificate of appropriateness, so I'm just up here.
What I was going to ask a question is if the commissioners are okay to see where we wanted to go, because there's been a number of suggestions that need to still be ironed out. How would you feel about coming back to us, having a chance to address those?
Well, I think the Wind certainly would be happy to come back on the certificate of appropriateness. I hope that what we all can agree on is the demolition. Obviously being kind of the separate application, and the hope that that might be the low-hanging fruit that we could address tonight, and then come back for the second part with respond to the comments. Provide an updated filing and continue with on the certificate of appropriateness on the design. So if the chair would entertain that, I think there is low-hanging fruit.
You give me more power than I take. I always say to people, I am one voice on this commission and I am one vote. I don't make that determination unless we don't have a quorum, and I take the power of continuing it to the next one. But I'd be interested to hear how the other commissioners feel about that. My personal feeling, I mean, I like the project. I do like it. I think it needs tweaking, and I think you're fine with that. I think there have been a number of fantastic concerns and suggestions that I personally would like to see addressed. I would. My preference would be to do the demolition at the same time that we've decided on what the project is.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Yeah, rather than putting us into a.
But I'd like to do it, quickly. Let's not, take
Oh,
all
yeah.
the time in the world. But I think you kind of want to. It's kind of a 1-2 thing, I would assume.
Yes. Can I, Karen? This would be yours and Jim's thing. We have because we've added this one. It continued it to here. Can we not continue it to the 6th? I know that's not a 2-week deal; it's a 1-week deal.
So-
but are we able to do that?
You certainly can. However, I think there's a lot of input that has been provided, and given it's a quick turnaround, your meeting on the 20th of September, I think would be a logical time frame for them to respond to those comments and bring it back to you.
Good point. I was thinking that had already been yes. Are you okay with that?
Yes, we are. I think that would give us time, particularly, responding to the comments, on the certificate of appropriateness and the design. Could I ask if there are, any questions, with regard to the demolition approval? I know it was addressed in our filings. It was not obviously the focus of, the comments tonight, from the public. I think, looking at the Mass Cultural Resource Information System, filing, on this building, describes the architecture style as altered beyond recognition, no style. I think, looking at it in terms of its contribution, to the district, I would hope, but wouldn't presume that there would be, kind of a shared view on that. But if there is any questions, on that, if the commission is not willing to take that up separately tonight, at least if we could, flesh out if there are, any questions, concerns, open items, with regard to that separate application for demolition.
My personal answer would be, and again, I'm only one voice, one vote, is that with an acceptable, project, I like the project, but with tweaking in that, you can't build it unless what's there is demolished. But we also wouldn't want to find that it's almost like a predetermination. So I don't have any problems with that.
Yeah, if I may, I think the demolishing seems pretty simple, but I think approving that before we have more of an idea of getting the right design is kind of putting the cart before the horse. The application's going to happen once the project is kind of set and here's how we're going to do it. So I mean that's why I'd like to keep it the same because I think it's that quick. But again, okay.
In other words, what's there, as you say, has been identified as no style, but the thing is, it's better than a pile of rubble. Yeah. So, yeah.
Understood. I just wanted to see, again, if there were any, kind of sleeper issues, on that hadn't been voiced or we weren't aware of. I certainly understand the commission's desire to take this, as a 1-2. But just, wanted to, again, to understand if there was going to be any, issues that we needed to respond to, with regard to the style of the building, its history, that would get in the way of its demolition with an approved project. Certainly, I know, that Wynn has no desire, and nor do I think Conrad has any desire in that building coming down, without something going up and replacing it. But that's helpful and appreciated.
And I think it's great that Wynn wants to invest and develop this for the community. Jim's been taking notes. I've been taking notes. I think there's a number of comments, and I thank you for your receptiveness on some of the comments from not only the commission but the public that have been made.
Right, thank you. And in case it wasn't obviously reflected in the record, as both a resident of Barnstable and property owner at 255 Main Street, I want to offer my full-throated endorsement and support of this project in my individual capacity as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. So, in light of that, what's been said, no one has an objection. I'm going to make a motion that we continue this to September 20th. Does anyone have an objection to that before I ask for a second?
I don't, but can I just make one quick comment? Because, first of all, I appreciate everybody who came out, both the letters that came in and people who stepped up to the dais to have public comment. That's everything you say, whether it's pro, whether it's con, is important, and thank you for doing that. I just want to I want to piggyback on something Commissioner Crowley said earlier. We've talked a lot about like traffic and water and school buses and a place for the kids to play and all that kind of stuff. We've got to be careful. The committee has a certain purview, and a lot of that isn't in it. What our purview is to look at this design and say, does that fit the guidelines of what we're looking to have Hyannis look like for the future? So though I echo the chairwoman's enthusiasm for the project and think I like it, it's great, I also agree with Tom and with others who have said it's a little too modern. So if we could take some of the great things that Ms. Penn came with it and our architect came and talk about the different little, be it shutters or trim or Juliets or cupolas or widow's peaks or whatever, I think we can come up with a design that'll look fantastic. This looks great, but that will get more the character of what Hyannis is. But as to again, even my feelings of the project and affordable housing, all that, it doesn't matter for what we're trying to do here. We're just talking about the aesthetic. So I just wanted to just throw that out there because there was a lot of great comments, but some of them in my head, I'm like, I can't make a decision on those. Those aren't my, what I do.
And as Commissioner Matthews has mentioned, I mentioned earlier, but just to reiterate, and Mary Ann, you also mentioned to it, things were brought up like, playgrounds and bus things and all that. Even though they're not in our purview, it is, for the most part, I don't prevent people from bringing them up because they're important to kind of touch on, but also to, like, well, the town will, the schools will readdress that. But it is not in our purview. It is the character. And anyone can, next time we'll probably make sure that every once in a while I do that, I read out the actual purview so that we stay clear to it. And Jim, if you could provide that purview to our applicants, you probably already have, just simply that's what we actually vote on. If it were a problem with buses or problems with playgrounds, we would not be judging on that. We do judge on the character and the historical nature. That's our job. Okay, so in that case, is there a second to continue it to the September 20th?
Second.
Both of them. I was just thinking to myself, I think it's a draw.
Price is
Okay.
right.
Yeah. Commissioner Carling.
Yes, I'm in favor of that.
Commissioner Clark. Commissioner Doherty.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinckley Needham.
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews.
Aye.
Commissioner Kay.
Aye.
I also say aye. So we will continue that to the September 20th meeting. I'm sorry I said to next week. Jim's absolutely right. That would not give you time to absorb all that. And thank you very much for a wonderful presentation.
Yes, thank you. That was great.
And thank you to everyone who spoke. All right. So we don't have any matters not reasonably anticipated by the chair, I take it? Approval of the August 2nd, 20... I'll grant a minute while we... Yeah, I know. I'm going to grant a minute just so we can...
I second. Right now.
Excuse me, please, if I could ask conversation to go out into the hallway so we can continue our meeting. Excuse me to the audience. If I could ask you to take it in the hallway so we can continue with the business we need at hand. Thank you. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Okay, so approval of the August 2nd, 2023 minutes. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Someone want to make a motion to approve those?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Crowley, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Matthews? Okay, so we'll start at that end this time. Commissioner Doherty?
Aye.
Commissioner Hinckley Needham?
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews?
Aye.
Commissioner Kay? Aye. Commissioner Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
I also say aye. All right. Last but not least, well, I want to wish everyone a happy Labor Day. Enjoy. Commissioner Doherty?
Just a
That
couple,
means you want to say
a couple quick questions. The art wall that we approved, it's over at Labor Day.
a weekend.
Oh, it is on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay,
We
great.
said the weekend after Labor
And
Day.
I just have a question. Whatever happened to the trolley stops that we approved?
Yeah, the parkettes.
They had to get built after the design was approved, so they get manufactured and, we don't have them yet. So it will be next season, very likely.
Next season for the...
Very likely, but we don't have them in-house yet.
Okay, good question. Anything else? Anybody?
Can we meet here all the time?
Pardon?
Can we meet here all the time?
What's the second
You
time
feel
we've done
very
it?
powerful up here, right?
All good things must come to an end. So, what was that, Karen? That's right. Yeah. So,
We just need to have more people come to the public comment, so that way we have to come in here. Just invite people.
drum up that audience.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, motion to adjourn?
Second. No, motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Matthews? Commissioner Crowley? Commissioner Clark?
Abstain.
Abstain? Okay.
I second that.
You can abstain if you want to.
Just getting warmed up. Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Doherty?
Aye.
Commissioner Hinckley?
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews?
Aye.
Commissioner Kay? I also say aye. You do realize you have to come up with